There is a moment right at the very beginning of everything, before there was an avatar, before there were 4 nations or a 100-year war, where a frightened man kneels at the foot of a creature the size of a small mountain and asks to borrow fire. And the lion turtle lowers its enormous head and presses a single glowing claw to the man's shoulder, and just like that, for as long as the hunt lasts, that ordinary person can hold living flame in his open palm. That is where all of this actually starts. Not with a chosen child, not with a war, but with a lone. Tonight on Ember, we are going to walk slowly through every single way a human being learns to move the world in avatar, water, earth, fire, and air, and all the strange branches that grow off each one of them. The healing and the bloodbending, the metal and the molten rock, the lightning and the quiet, warm fire that only keeps a man from freezing, all the way down to the oldest art there is, the one that came before the 4 elements even existed. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, let your shoulders drop away from your ears, and if you have not subscribed yet, it genuinely does help us keep making these. Settle in. We will be here a good long while. Let me stay with that image of the lone for a moment, because it is the thing almost everyone forgets when they think about bending. We meet these arts fully formed. We meet a small, blind girl who can throw boulders, an old general who can catch lightning out of the air, a boy in an iceberg who wakes up already a master of the wind, and the story never stops to remind you that none of this was always here. But the story of where it came from is told softly in one of the loveliest stretches of the whole franchise, and it is worth starting there tonight, because once you understand the lone, every element that follows makes a different kind of sense. Long, long ago, in an age the later series calls the era of Raava, humanity did not live on open land the way we picture it. People live crowded together on the backs of the lion turtles, gigantic ancient beasts, part temple, part fortress, part living island, each one carrying an entire city of humans on its shell. The world beyond the lion turtle was called the Spirit Wilds, a tangled, luminous, dangerous wilderness where spirits roamed and a human being was fragile and small. And when a person needed to go down into the wilds to gather food, the lion turtle would grant them an element. It would place its power upon them temporarily, the way you might hand someone a lantern before they walk into the dark, and for the length of that journey the person could bend fire or water or earth or air, whatever their particular lion turtle carried. Then they came home and they gave it back. The element was never theirs. It was a tool, lent and returned, and this is the single most important idea in the whole cosmology, so I want to say it plainly. Bending did not begin as a birthright. It began as something borrowed from a creature far older and far greater than any human, used carefully, and handed back at the door. The man who changed that was named Wan, and he is the first avatar, the root of the entire line that runs all the way down to Aang and beyond him to Korra. Wan was a thief, a poor young man scraping a living in the lower rings of his lion turtle city, and the thing he stole was fire. He convinced his lion turtle to grant him the power of fire, and then, instead of giving it back, he kept it. He left the city and lived out in the spirit wilds with a stolen element, learning to survive, and in doing so, he became something no human had ever been, a person who carried an element permanently out on his own with no shell over his head. That choice, one desperate young man refusing to return what he had borrowed, is the crack that the whole future pours through. Out in the wilds, Wan met the spirits, and here we reach the 2 beings who sit behind everything, Raava and Vaatu. Raava is the spirit of light and peace, and Vaatu is the spirit of darkness and chaos, and they are not really enemies in the way we usually mean that word. They are 2 halves of one balance, locked together, and every 10,000 years, at a cosmic event called harmonic convergence, when the planets align and the spirit world and the physical world draw close, they battle for the fate of the age. Wan, trying to do the right thing and getting it exactly wrong, freed Vaatu at the worst possible moment and let chaos loose into the world. To set it right, he spent the rest of his life chasing the consequences, and at the next harmonic convergence, roughly 10,000 years before the world you know from the shows, Wan did the thing that made him the first avatar. He fused permanently with Raava, human spirit and light spirit bound into one being, so that a single person could hold the light against the dark across the turning of the ages. And here's the correction I want to make early, because it is one this channel has gotten wrong before and viewers rightly caught it. Wan did not die young, and he did not die worn out and defeated in some quiet corner. Wan lived a very long life, decades and decades of it, traveling the world trying to stop wars between the scattered human tribes now that the elements had spread among them. And when he finally died, an old man on that same battlefield, he was not swinging a fist anymore. He was lying there quietly with Raava beside him, still grieving that the peace he wanted had never quite arrived. He failed in the end to unite the world in his own lifetime. But before the darkness took him, Raava made him a promise, and the direction of that promise matters. It was Raava who swore to Wan that she would be with him through all of his lifetimes to come, not Wan who commanded it of her. The light spirit looked at this one flawed, brave, exhausted man and chose to return to him, again and again, forever. That is the beginning of the Avatar cycle, the reason a single soul keeps coming back wearing a new face and a new nation each time. So that is where the power comes from at the very top. But underneath the lion turtles and the Avatar, humanity still had to learn the 4 elements the hard way, person to person, generation to generation, and none of them learned it from each other. Each of the 4 bending arts was taught to human beings by a non-human teacher, and this is one of my favorite pieces of world building in anything, because the series is so consistent about it. The first firebenders learned from the dragons. The first earthbenders learned from the badger moles, those enormous blind burrowing beasts who navigate the tunnels of the Earth Kingdom by feeling the ground itself. The first airbenders learned from the flying bison, the sky bison, the great 6-legged creatures of which Appa is one of the last. And the airbenders' arrow tattoos are a direct tribute to the natural markings that run along a sky bison's spine and forehead. Fire, earth, air, each of them handed down to humans by an animal that already knew the art in its bones. And then there is water, which is the strange one, the outlier, and this is the detail that people love to fact-check and find is completely true. Waterbenders did not learn from an animal, they learned from the moon. The water tribes watch the way the moon pulls the ocean back and forth, the great slow breathing of the tides, the push and the pull, and they taught themselves to do with their bodies what the moon does with the sea. The moon is the original waterbender. There is no water badger mole, no water dragon. There's only the pale light in the sky, dragging the ocean toward it and letting it fall away, and a people patient enough to copy it. We will come back to the moon in a big way when we get to water proper, because that relationship is far deeper and far more dangerous than it first appears. But for now, just hold on to the shape of it. 3 elements learned from beasts, 1 learned from the heavens. The Avatar, then, is the one person who is allowed to break the deepest rule of this whole system, the rule that a human being belongs to 1 element and 1 element only. Everyone else in this world bends the element of the nation they were born into and nothing else for their entire life. The Avatar bends all 4, cycling through the nations in a fixed order as they reincarnate, air to water to earth to fire and back around to air again. Aang was an air nomad. The Avatar before him, Roku, was Fire Nation. Before Roku came Kyoshi of the Earth Kingdom, and before her Kuruk of the Water Tribes, and before him Yang Chen of the Air Nomads. And after Aang comes Korra, born to the Southern Water Tribe, which is why her series opens where it does. The cycle is not random, it is a wheel, always turning in the same direction, and every spoke of it is a whole human life. There is even a traditional order in which an avatar learns the 4, and it is not the same as the reincarnation order. An avatar usually begins with the element they were born bending, the one that comes naturally, and then moves on to water, earth, fire, air, in a sequence built around a single hard idea, that you must eventually master the element that is most opposite to your own nature. For Aang, the free and gentle airbender, the great struggle was always going to be earth, the stubborn, immovable, stand-your-ground element, everything he was not. We will get to why that matters enormously when we reach the avatar state near the end of tonight. But this is the frame. 1 human, 1 element, learned from a beast or from the sky, except for the single soul that carries all 4 and keeps coming back. That is the shape of the whole world. Everything else we talk about tonight is a variation, a branch, or a secret hidden inside it. So let us start where the series starts its own list, with the element of change itself, water. Waterbending is the art of change, and if you watch the way a skilled waterbender moves, you can feel the philosophy before anyone explains it. There is no bracing, no planting of the feet, no meeting force with force. A waterbender flows around what comes at them and turns the attacker's own momentum back on itself. The whole art is built on a single idea the show returns to over and over: push and pull. The endless back and forth of two forces that are really one. It maps directly onto the old idea of yin and yang, two opposites that cannot exist without each other, and it maps directly, again, onto the moon and the sea. The moon pushes, the ocean pulls, and the waterbender stands in between, borrowing that rhythm and making it their own. When Katara fights, she is not overpowering anyone. She is redirecting, streaming water from one motion into the next, freezing it to ice for a hard edge and melting it back to liquid to slip a grip. And the better she gets, the less it looks like fighting at all, and the more it looks like dancing with the weather. The element has 3 states, and a real master moves between all of them without thinking, which is what makes water so adaptable in a fight. Liquid for whips and waves and grabs, ice for blades and walls and armor, and vapor, the thinnest and most spiritual state, mist and steam and fog. A waterbender who understands the vapor state can pull moisture straight out of the humid air when there is no river or ocean nearby, condensing a mouthful of water out of a cloud. And this is worth pausing on because people mix it up constantly. When a waterbender works with mist or steam, they are not bending the air. They are bending the water that lives inside the air, the moisture in the cloud, the damp in the fog. It looks like airbending. It is not. It is water hiding in a thinner disguise. But you cannot really talk about waterbending without talking about the moon, because the connection between them is not a metaphor. It is a physical, load-bearing fact of this world, and it is the source of both water's greatest strength and its single most terrifying weakness. Waterbending grows stronger at night. Under moonlight, a waterbender is more powerful than they are by day, and under a full moon, they are at their absolute peak, capable of things that would be impossible any other night of the month. And the reverse is just as true. During a lunar eclipse, when the moon's face goes dark, waterbending fails completely. The power drains straight out of a bender's hands. Water is tied to the moon the way the tide is utterly, and a waterbender at the wrong hour of the wrong night is only a person standing near some water. The show takes this idea to its most extraordinary place at the North Pole, in the finale of the very first book, in the siege of the Northern Water Tribe. To understand it, you have to know about the Spirit Oasis, a warm, green, sheltered pocket deep inside the northern city where 2 koi fish, one white and one black, swim in an endless circle around each other. Those fish are not decoration. They are Tui and La, the moon spirit and the ocean spirit, push and pull, the 2 forces that gave waterbending to the world in the first place. And long ago they crossed over from the spirit world and gave up their immortality to live here in the physical world as these 2 circling fish. The moon in the sky and the white koi in the pond are the same being. And so when the Fire Nation Admiral Zhao, drunk on ambition, wades into that oasis and pulls the white koi out of the water and kills the moon spirit, the effect is instantaneous and global. Every waterbender in the world loses their power in the same heartbeat. The sky itself turns a sick, bloodless red. Zhao has not just committed a murder, he has reached up and switched off an entire element for everyone, everywhere at once. It is one of the boldest things the series ever does, and it works because the rules were laid so carefully beforehand. What restores it is a sacrifice, and it involves Princess Yue of the Northern Tribe. As an infant, Yue was sickly and dying, and her father carried her to the spirit oasis and laid her in the pond, and the moon spirit gave a piece of its own life to save her. Yue was born with a strand of the moon inside her. So when the moon spirit dies, Yue understands, before anyone says it aloud, that she has something to give back. She walks to the pond, gives her life to return the moon's life, and becomes the moon herself, rising into the sky as a new spirit. It is a quiet, devastating scene. A young woman who barely got to live, choosing to become the light that every waterbender for the rest of time will draw their strength from. There are people in this world who will bend water under a full moon 1,000 years from now and never know that the light they are reaching toward used to be a girl. Now, the people who practice this art. There are 3 water tribes, and they are not the same. The Northern Water Tribe at the North Pole is the largest and the grandest, a walled city of ice and canals that survived the war more or less intact. The Southern Water Tribe at the South Pole is its mirror and its tragedy, once a great civilization, and by the time we meet it in the show, reduced to a tiny, struggling village. because the Fire Nation spent decades raiding the South specifically to hunt down and remove its waterbenders. That is why Katara, at the start of the series, is the last waterbender in the entire Southern tribe, a girl with a rare and dangerous talent and absolutely no one left alive to teach her. And then there is the third tribe, the one people forget, the Foggy Swamp tribe, way off in the southeast of the Earth Kingdom, descended from southern migrants who wandered north long ago and settled in a vast, humid, tangled swamp. They bend differently, we will come to them, but the point for now is that water is not one culture, it is three, scattered across both ends of the earth and one strange green pocket in the middle. The northern tribe carries a shadow and Katara runs straight into it. In the north, waterbending was split by law along a line of sex. Men learned to fight. Women were forbidden from combat bending entirely and were permitted to learn only one thing, healing. When Katara arrives at the north desperate to be trained, the master of the city, an old, proud, formidable bender named Paku, refuses to teach her a single offensive move because she is a girl, and it does not matter how gifted she is. What breaks the deadlock is not an argument about fairness, it is a necklace. Paku recognizes the carved betrothal necklace Katara wears, because he made it himself decades earlier for a woman named Kana he was going to marry, a woman who fled the north rather than accept a life she had not chosen and made her way to the south. Kana is Katara's grandmother. The old man realizes he is looking at the granddaughter of the love he lost, and something in him gives way and he agrees to train her. It is a lovely, complicated moment because the show does not pretend that one softened heart fixes a whole unjust system. It just cracks a door open for one girl who was never going to accept it being closed. That leaves healing, which the North treated as the lesser art, the women's art, and which is in truth one of the more remarkable powers in the entire world. Healing waterbending works from the inside. The human body is full of water and threaded through with pathways of energy the show calls chi, and a healer draws water over an injury and uses it to guide and accelerate the body's own chi, speeding the closing of a wound, easing pain, mending what the body could mend on its own given enough time, only faster. In the North, it was taught formally by an elderly master named Yugoda, patient and kind, in a class full of young women who were never allowed to learn anything else. Katara, characteristically, learns healing almost by accident. Early in her travels, Aang accidentally burns her hands, and in her panic, she plunges them into water and finds, to her own shock, that the water glows and the pain fades and the burn eases. She is that rare thing, a bender who can both fight and heal, who took the art the North tried to divide and simply refused the division. And healing has a peak, a rare and sacred version, and it comes back to the spirit oasis. The water of that oasis, the pool where Tui and Law swim, holds extraordinary power, and Katara is given a small vial of it, spirit water, to carry with her. She uses it once. At the end of the second book, in the crystal catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se, Azula strikes Aang with lightning at the exact instant he is opening himself to the Avatar state, and it kills him. His heart stops, and Katara uses the spirit water, the last of the moon and ocean's own healing power, to bring him back from death. It is the greatest act of healing in the show, and it is a one-time thing, gone the moment it is used, which is exactly why it lands so hard. I will only add one clarification here, because the family trees in this world are a genuine tangle. The great healer Katara raises in her own future, her daughter, is also named Kaya, a waterbending master. And Katara's mother, the woman killed in a Fire Nation raid on the southern village when Katara was a small child, was also named Kaya, and she was not a bender at all. Same name, two very different women, 2 generations apart. A non-bender lost to the war, and a master healer born long after it ended. Water, more than any other element, is an art that runs in families and grief, which brings us to the darkest thing water can do, the shadow that lives on the underside of healing, because they are the same insight taken to opposite ends. If a healer can guide the water and the chi inside a body to mend it, then a bender cruel enough and strong enough can seize the water inside a body and move it against the person's will. That is bloodbending. It is the art of reaching into a living creature and controlling it like a puppet, bending the fluid that runs through every muscle. And it is the most feared and taboo technique in the entire waterbending tradition. and the story of how it was discovered is one of the more unsettling things in the show, precisely because you understand exactly how a person could get there. It was invented by a woman named Hama. Hama was a waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe, from the same tribe as Katara, from the generation the Fire Nation raids were tearing apart. She was captured and taken far from the south and locked in a Fire Nation prison built specifically to hold waterbenders, which meant a cell kept bone dry, no rivers, no snow, no pools, nothing to bend. The water starved out of her reach on purpose. And in that cell, over long years, Hama did not go quiet. She started to think. She realized that even in a dry stone room, she was surrounded by water the whole time, because water is inside every living thing that walks past the bars, the rats in the walls, the guards outside the door. She practiced first on the vermin, learning to feel and seize the water inside a small living body, and then, on a night when the moon was full and her power was at its very highest, she reached out and took hold of a guard, moved his own limbs against him, and walked herself right out of that prison. She turned her captors into her escape. It is a monstrous thing, and it is also, if you let yourself feel it, an almost admirable act of pure refusal. A woman who would not be caged even when they took the sea away from her. When we meet Hama in the third book, in the episode called The Puppet Master, she is running a cozy inn and playing the part of a sweet old lady. And she recognizes Katara instantly as another southern waterbender, the first she has seen in a lifetime. She teaches Katara the ordinary tricks, pulling water from the air, and then, on the night of a full moon, she reveals what she really became. And she tries to force her secret onto Katara like a poisoned inheritance, insisting that any southern bender who survived what the Fire Nation did has the right, even the duty, to use every weapon she can find. And it ends in the worst way. To stop Hama from killing Aang and Sokka, whom the old woman has seized and is puppeting toward each other, Katara has to bloodbend Hama herself, take control of the woman who invented the art, and wrench her to the ground. Hama, being dragged down, is delighted. She got what she wanted. She proved that even Katara, gentle and good, could be made to do it. Katara is left kneeling in the dirt, sobbing, having just discovered the single worst thing her own hands are capable of. She never uses it willingly, and she becomes one of the strongest voices for stamping it out. Now, in the original series, the rule on bloodbending is firm. It needs a full moon. Only under that peak of lunar power is a waterbender strong enough to override another person's body, which is why every bloodbending scene in Aang's era happens under a bright full moon. That rule is a mercy in a way. It means the art is rare and hard and only possible a few nights a month, a horror kept mostly locked in a box by the sky. And then the legend of Korra opened the box. Here is the correction, and it matters because the two eras play by very different rules on this point. In Korra's time, generations after Aang, there appears a bloodline of benders who can bloodbend with no moon at all, in broad daylight whenever they choose. The first we learn of is a man named Yakone, who built a criminal empire in Republic City on exactly this power, controlling rooms full of people in the middle of the day, an ability so far beyond the old rules that the city could barely comprehend it. It was a rare inborn gift, something he was simply born able to do, and he passed it to his two sons. And this later kind of bloodbending is more frightening still because these benders do not need the sweeping arm motions Hama used. They can do it with a look, with sheer will, a technique the fans and the wider lore describe as psychic bloodbending, an invisible grip that a victim never sees coming. No full moon, no gesture, no warning, just a man staring at you while your own body betrays you. Yakone's story ends in a courtroom, and this is where two arts we will properly get to later brush up against each other, so I will only touch it now. Yakone bloodbent an entire courtroom in the middle of his own trial and nearly escaped, and he was stopped by Avatar Aang, who used a far older and rarer power to reach in and take Yakone's bending away from him permanently, so that he could never bloodbend anyone again. Hold that image. We will come back to what Aang did and to why it is the only thing in the world that can truly disarm a bender like this when we reach the oldest art of all near the end of tonight. But Yakone's sons are the part of this that lands hardest, and I do not think enough people connect the whole shape of it. He had two boys, and he raised them in secret in the frozen north to be weapons, drilling them in bloodbending out on the ice, pushing them to master the moonless kind of control he had. The younger boy could barely stand what his father was making him into. The elder son took to it and grew cold and eventually ran away from home and reinvented himself. That elder son grows up to become Amon, the masked revolutionary who terrorizes Republic City in the first book of Korra, the man who leads an entire movement of the powerless against benders, and who claims to have been given a holy gift by the spirits, the power to strip a person's bending away forever with a touch to the forehead. Crowds believe him. He looks like a prophet. He is lying. Amon has no spiritual power at all. Amon is his father's son, a bloodbender more gifted than any who ever lived, and what he actually does when he lays his thumb on a bender's brow is blood bend them so precisely, reaching so deep into the body, that he damages their ability to bend and shuts it off. It looks like a miracle. It is the darkest branch of waterbending, dressed up in the robes of a saint, wielded by a man who truly hates bending and hides that he is the deadliest bender in the room. I find that one of the cleverest reveals in the whole franchise because it takes the taboo Katara wept over and asks what happens when someone builds a religion on it. Amon's story ends when his brother, the younger son, exposes him, and the two of them die together in an explosion out on the water, the family that bloodbending built finally consuming itself. So follow the arc of this one art all the way through. It begins as an act of survival by a woman the world had truly wronged, discovered in a dry cell because she refused to be helpless. It becomes a taboo so heavy that the one good person forced to use it can never forgive herself for it, and helps to see it outlawed across the land. And then it mutates, generations later, into a moonless, gestureless, inherited power, and finally into a weapon a man uses to erase other people's magic while pretending to be a healer of society. Every step of that is water. Every step of it is the same simple, terrible fact that Hama worked out alone in the dark. That where there is life, there is water, and where there is water, there is something to bend. That same fact opens a gentler door too, and it takes us back to that third tribe I mentioned, the one tucked away in the swamp. If there is water inside a person, there is water inside a plant. More of it, in fact, sap and moisture running through every vine and leaf and root. And a waterbender who learns to feel it can bend the plant by bending the water within it. This is plant bending, and it is the specialty of the Foggy Swamp tribe. Their world is a single, vast, living wetland, and their whole way of bending grew out of it. Where a northern bender learns from clean snow and open sea, a swamp bender learns from thick, warm, tangled, living water. And their style is more grounded and more rooted, straighter backed. Because their water does not flow the way an ocean does, it sits and it grows. The master of it we actually meet is a man named Hu, and he introduces himself in about as alarming a fashion as you could picture, as a towering monster made of vines and mud that lurches out of the swamp to attack the group. When they finally cut him down to size, the monster falls apart and reveals a calm, smiling man sitting at the center of it, who had simply bent the water inside a mass of swamp vines and worn them like an enormous body. Under a full moon, when a waterbender is at full strength, plant bending scales up to something staggering. Whole trees, whole curtains of hanging vines moved at once. But Hu is not really there to be a threat. He's there to teach a philosophy, and the swamp tribe's belief is one of the loveliest ideas in the show. At the center of their swamp stands a single enormous banyan grove tree, and Hu explains that the entire swamp, every separate tree, is really one tree, all of it grown from the same root system, all connected under the surface. And he extends that outward to everything. We think we are separate, he says, but we are all branches of one great living thing, all connected, all one, the way the swamp only looks like many trees. From the outside, plant bending is a horror movie, a monster in the water. Underneath, it is the tenderest theology in the world. Then there is the sharp end of water, ice, which I've been mentioning as a state, but which deserves its own moment because ice is where a defensive art grows teeth. A waterbender in a cold place, or simply strong enough to freeze on command, can turn the flowing element into something rigid and lethal in an instant. Ice claws sheathing the fingers, discs and daggers thrown like blades, spears, walls thrown up as shields, ramps and paths frozen underfoot to travel and climb, whole surfaces locked solid to trap an enemy's feet. The genius of ice in a fight is the switching. A whip is soft and cannot be blocked, and then it hardens into a spike mid-strike, or a solid wall shatters back into water to flow through a gap and reform. The standout practitioner of water as a weapon in the later series is a woman named Ming Hua, one of the deadliest criminals in Korra's world. And what makes her extraordinary is that she was born with no arms at all. Where another bender would move water with their hands, Ming Hua forms her own arms out of water, two long, fluid, tentacle limbs of it that she can freeze to picks to scale a sheer cliff or lengthen across a room or lash out with. She turned the absence of arms into a weapon no arm bender could copy. The wider lore sometimes reaches for terms like psychic waterbending to describe how effortless her control looks, and the exact label is a little loose, so I will just say what is certain on screen, that a woman with no hands became as fluid and terrifying a waterbender as the series ever showed, purely by making the element itself do the work her body could not. And at the far spiritual end of water, there is one more branch, the one that reaches past the body and past the plant, and touches the spirit world directly. This one belongs almost entirely to the later series, so I want to be clear about the source. In the Legend of Korra, there is a form of bending called spirit bending, and it grows straight out of healing. A healer moves water over a body to guide its energy. A spirit bender does the same thing to a spirit. The technique is to encircle a spirit with a stream of glowing water and use it to redirect the spirit's energy. And depending on the bender's intent, it can pull a raging, corrupted, dark spirit back toward calm and balance, soothing it, purifying it, or it can be turned the other way and drive a peaceful spirit toward darkness and rage. It is healing aimed at the soul of a thing rather than the flesh. The bender who brings this into the story is Unalaq, Korra's uncle, a deeply spiritual and deeply manipulative man, chief of the water tribes, and far more interested in the spirit world than anyone around him. He teaches spirit bending to Korra, presenting it as a sacred lost art, calming dark spirits in front of her to prove his wisdom. And Korra does learn it and does use it for good, learning to cleanse the corrupted spirits that begin roaming into the physical world. But Unalaq's own use of it is the warning built into the technique, because the same art that purifies can corrupt, and he is willing to use it either way to get what he wants. It is water's oldest lesson one more time: the healer and the bloodbender, the purifier and the corrupter, the same hand turned to opposite ends. That is the whole personality of this element if you step back and look at the full spread of it tonight. Water is the supplest and gentlest of the four, the one tied to the light in the night sky and to the tides and to the moisture in your own breath. And precisely because it is so gentle and so connected to living things, it is also the only element that can reach inside you, mend you, or seize you, soothe a wounded spirit, or twist a peaceful one. The element of change refuses, right down to its roots, to be only one thing. If water is the element of change, earth is the element of substance, and the philosophy behind it is almost the exact opposite of everything we just spent our time on. A waterbender wins by yielding. An earthbender wins by not yielding, by being the one thing in the fight that will not move. The physical style is rooted and powerful, built on low, strong, planted stances, drawn in the real world largely from a southern Chinese martial art called Hung Gar. All firm footing and direct, forceful strikes. But the mental core of earthbending is subtler than it looks, and it is captured in an idea the show calls neutral Jing. There are, in this world, three kinds of energy you can bring to a confrontation. Positive Jing for attacking, negative Jing for retreating, and between them, neutral Jing, which means listening and waiting, doing seemingly nothing at all, holding perfectly still while you feel out the exact right moment, and then acting once, decisively, with everything you have. That is the earthbender's secret. It looks like stubbornness, like a wall, like a person who simply will not budge. It is actually patience, coiled, and waiting, and there is a world of difference between the two. The art was taught to humans by the badger moles, and they are one of my favorite creatures in the whole setting. Badger moles are enormous, blind, burrowing beasts native to the Earth Kingdom, and being blind, they navigate the endless dark of their tunnels entirely by feeling the vibrations of the earth around them. sensing the world through the ground itself. The very first humans to learn earthbending were two lovers named Oma and Shu, from two villages at war with each other, who met in secret in the mountains between them and learned to bend by watching the badger moles move the earth. They used their new art to carve a secret network of tunnels so they could keep meeting despite the war. And when Shu was killed in the fighting, Oma, in her grief and her rage, unleashed her earthbending on both villages with such devastating power that she forced the war to end, and then, rather than take revenge, she built a great city in that place as a monument to a love the war had killed, and named it after him, Omashu, a joining of both their names. That is the origin of one of the largest cities in the Earth Kingdom, and it is why the tunnel where the group learns this story is called the Cave of Two Lovers. Earthbending is born, right at its root, out of patience, defiance, and grief. The same three notes struck in a different key from water. The signature perception of an earthbender, the thing the badger moles do naturally, is called seismic sense, and it is one of the defining abilities in the whole show because of who masters it. An earthbender in contact with the ground can feel the vibrations traveling through it, the footsteps, the movements, the shifting weight of everything around them, and read those vibrations into a complete picture of their surroundings, a kind of sonar carried through stone and soil. And the greatest seismic sense ever shown belongs to Toph Beifong, who is blind. Toph was born blind into a wealthy, sheltering family who treated her as helpless and fragile and kept her hidden away. As a small child, she ran off and found the badger moles, and being blind like them, she connected with them completely, and they taught her to bend the way they do through feeling the earth. Seismic sense is not a trick Toph uses, it is how she sees. The ground is her eyes. She feels the vibrations through the soles of her bare feet and builds from them a map so detailed she can tell who is standing where, and she refined it further than the badger moles ever needed to, learning to feel a person's heartbeat and breathing through the earth so that she can tell when someone is lying by the little flutter a lie sends through their body. A blind girl who can see farther than anyone and catch a liar in the act. It is one of the great satisfying inversions in the series, the supposedly helpless one turning out to be the sharpest person in any room. And because her sight runs through the ground, it comes with very specific limits, and the writers are disciplined about them, which is part of why Toph feels so real. She cannot sense what is not touching the earth. Someone flying or floating in water is nearly invisible to her. She cannot see through materials that do not carry vibration well the way stone does. And she keeps her feet bare at all times because shoes dull the connection, put a layer between her and the world, and blind her. The clearest exposure of her weakness comes in the great desert, the Sea Wang, where the ground turns to loose, shifting sand, and sand does not carry a clean vibration. It scatters it. In the desert, Toph's crisp vision goes blurry and uncertain, everything soft and fuzzy and hard to read, and for once you see her genuinely disoriented, a person who is never lost, suddenly unsure of her footing. She hated it so much that she went on to master sandbending specifically to conquer that weakness, but we will come to that. The point is that her power has an honest shape. It is not everything sight, it is ground sight, and the show never lets her forget it. The other great earthbending master of the original series is a very different creature, and he is the purest demonstration of neutral Jing you will ever get, King Bumi of Omashu. When we first meet Bumi, he seems like a cackling, half-mad old man playing games, refusing to give a straight answer, and it is easy to write him off. But Bumi is one of the mightiest earthbenders alive and an old friend of Aang's from 100 years before, and everything about him is a lesson in that one idea, waiting for the right moment. When the Fire Nation takes his city, Bumi does not fight. He surrenders Omashu without a struggle and lets himself be locked in a metal coffin of a cell, and he waits for a very long time, doing seemingly nothing, while everyone assumes he has given up. And then, on the day of Black Sun, the day of a solar eclipse when the Fire Nation's own firebending is stripped away for a few minutes and every firebender in the city is suddenly powerless, Bumi acts. In one burst, he breaks himself free and single-handedly bends the Fire Nation right back out of his city, retaking Omashu by himself in the one window when it could be done cleanly. He waited months in a box for a few minutes of eclipse. That is neutral Jing. That is the whole philosophy of the element in one old man's grin. the patience that looks like passivity right up until the instant it becomes an avalanche. So already, before we touch a single one of Earth's exotic branches, you can see the personality of the element. It is not about brute force, though it has plenty of that. It is about substance and stillness and timing, about being the immovable thing in a moving world and knowing exactly when to stop being immovable. And the deepest irony of the whole element, the thing that runs through everything we are about to look at, is that the greatest earthbender who ever lived reached that height not by being the strongest, but by being the one who listened hardest in the dark with her feet bare on the ground. And that same girl invented the single most consequential new bending art of the entire era, an art that everyone in the world believed was flat out impossible: metal bending. And because this channel has told the story wrong before and viewers rightly corrected us, I want to get every detail of it exactly right tonight, because the true version is far better than the mistaken one anyway. For all of history up to this point, metal was the one thing an earthbender could not touch. Earthbenders move earth, stone, rock, soil, but metal was considered refined, purified, changed by human forging into something no longer earth, and so it sat outside the art entirely. Metal cages, metal cuffs, metal weapons, these were the standard way to hold an earthbender helpless, and it worked every single time for thousands of years. And then Toph broke it, and here's exactly how it happened. Near the close of Book 2, in the episode called The Guru, Toph is not in a Fire Nation cart, and there is no Fire Nation involvement at all, and I want to say that clearly because the wrong version has been told too often. What actually happens is that Toph is captured by two bounty hunters, Xin Fu, a fighting arena boss she had humiliated, and Master Yu, who had briefly been her own earthbending teacher back home. The two of them were hired by Toph's own father, Lao Beifong, to track her down and drag her back to the family estate in Gowling, because he could not accept his blind daughter living free out in the world. They lure her in and they lock her deliberately in a metal box, a wheeled iron cage with no earth anywhere inside it, because they know that a cage with no stone is a perfect prison for an earthbender. She is trapped, blind, cut off from the ground she sees through with nothing to bend. And in that box, feeling around with a sense that never turns off, Toph notices something no one before her had the patience or the sensitivity to feel. The metal walls around her are not truly pure. Metal is refined from ore dug out of the earth, and no matter how much a smith works it, there remain tiny traces of the original earth still trapped inside it. Minute impurities, little bits of unrefined mineral that never left. To almost any bender, those traces are far too small and too faint to feel. To Toph, whose senses ran finer than any earthbenders before her, they are just barely there, a whisper of earth inside the iron. And she reaches for those tiny scraps of earth, the fragments of stone still hiding inside the metal, and bends them, and through them she bends the whole wall, and she tears her way out of a cage designed to be inescapable. It is one of the great triumphant moments of the show, a blind 12-year-old girl doing the impossible out of pure refusal to be held. And the timing of it in the story is beautiful because it comes right after Guru Pathik, teaching Aang in a completely separate storyline, casually remarks that metal is really just another part of the earth, purified. The show tells you the secret and then shows you a child discovering it in the same breath. So the mechanism is simple and consistent once you have it. Metal bending is not really bending metal. It is finding and bending the last surviving trace of earth still locked inside the metal and moving the metal along with it. And this gives the art two hard rules the later series leans on constantly. The first is that the more pure the metal, the harder it is to bend, because purity means fewer earthen impurities to grip. And the ultimate expression of that is platinum, a metal so highly refined, so nearly perfectly pure, that it has essentially no earth left in it at all. And so platinum is unbendable, even to a master. In Korra's time, anyone who wants to build something an earthbender or a metalbender cannot touch builds it out of platinum. The second rule runs the other way. Metal that comes with a lot of earth still in it is easier to bend, and the clearest case is meteorite, space rock, raw and full of mineral impurities, which is highly bendable. Toph can throw meteorite metal around freely. I will flag one thing here because people conflate them. Sokka's famous space sword is forged from a meteorite, but Sokka is not a bender and the sword is not being bent. It is just an ordinary, extraordinary blade made from fallen metal. The meteorite is bendable in principle, but that particular sword is only ever a sword. Now here is what makes metal bending matter beyond one heroic escape, and it is why I would argue it is the biggest thing anyone invents in the whole timeline. Toph did not keep it to herself. In the years after the war, she founded a school, the Beifong Metal Bending Academy, and set about teaching the impossible to anyone with the sensitivity to learn it. And within a generation, metal bending went from a thing one blind prodigy could do to a widespread trained discipline. By the time of the Legend of Korra, it has completely reshaped the world. Republic City, the great new metropolis built after the war, is policed by an entire metal-bending police force, officers who fight with long, spooling cables of metal that they whip out and reel in, bending at a distance, zipping across rooftops and yanking criminals off their feet, a style that simply did not exist a generation earlier. That force is led fittingly by Toph's own daughter, Lin Beifong, the stern, iron-spined chief of police, who inherited both her mother's talent and a good deal of her hardness. And Toph's other daughter, Suyin Beifong, took the art in the opposite direction, away from law and toward beauty, founding a gleaming city called Zaofu, the home of the Metal Clan, an entire society built out of bent metal where the art is used for architecture and sculpture and dance and sport, the whole city able to fold itself closed like a flower at night behind shutters of metal. And the art keeps climbing. The finest control ever shown comes out of that same city of Zaofu, a woman named Kuvira, who becomes the great antagonist of the final book of Korra. Kuvira's control is so fine that she can bend thin bands and sheets of metal into cutting, wrapping, restraining shapes with surgical accuracy. And she uses that precision to try to conquer and unify the entire Earth Kingdom by force, turning a refined descendant of Toph's art into an engine of empire. And so you can trace the whole span of it, from a girl bending a whisper of impurity to escape a coffin her own father put her in, all the way to a warlord folding armies out of steel. One improvised act of desperation inside a box built to break her, and it rewrote what the second most common element in the world could do. That is what I find genuinely staggering about metal bending. A weakness held for thousands of years, the earthbender's cage, and it stopped being a weakness the moment one person refused to accept it as permanent and listened hard enough to find the crack. Metal bending is the best known branch of Earth, but it is not the only place the element goes somewhere unexpected. And the next one is the rarest and most dramatic of all, lava bending. Earth in its solid state is stone, but Earth has another state, the molten one, rock-heated until it flows. And a lava bender can phase solid Earth into liquid lava and back again, and command lava that is already flowing. It is earth bending taken to a place that looks almost like fire bending, rivers of glowing molten rock, but it is pure earth, the manipulation of stone changed to its liquid form. For most of history, this was thought of as an avatar-level power, something only the avatar could do by drawing on the full spirit of the earth. Several past avatars are known to have wielded it, including Kyoshi, the towering, fierce Earth Kingdom avatar, who used earthbending on a colossal scale, the only known female lava bender, and who, according to her own legend, split her peninsula away from the mainland to create Kyoshi Island as a refuge for her people. But the legend of Korra revealed that lava bending is not the avatars alone, and this is worth flagging as one of those rules the later series quietly opened up. There are ordinary benders born to a single element like everyone else who can do it. The first we meet is a criminal named Gazan, a member of the same dangerous group as the armless waterbender we discussed earlier. And Gazan is terrifying precisely because of how casual he is with it, melting solid stone walls into curtains of dripping lava, hurling molten discs, leaving trails of glowing rock behind him as he walks. And the second is far more sympathetic, one of the good guys, Bolin, an easygoing, warm-hearted earthbender who spends much of his story feeling like the least gifted person in every room. Bolin actually tries and fails to learn metal bending at Zaofu, watched by masters, and simply cannot do it, and it stings. And then, in a moment of pure desperation, cornered and about to watch people die, Bolin reaches down and discovers, to his own astonishment, that he can lava bend, an even rarer gift than the metal bending he could not master that was sitting inside him the whole time. I love that pairing, honestly, because the show puts the rare and the desperate side by side, the cold professional who kills with lava, and the anxious sweet kid who finds it in himself only when everything is on the line. Same art, opposite souls, which is becoming the theme of this whole night. Then there is sand bending, which is less a separate power than a whole regional style built around difficult ground. And it takes us back to that great desert where Toph lost her footing. The Siwang Desert is the largest in the Earth Kingdom, a vast, brutal sea of sand, and it is home to the Siwang tribes, desert people who bend the one form of earth they have, which is sand, endless loose dry earth. Sand does not behave like stone. It will not hold a shape. It shifts and pours and scatters. And so sandbending is a looser, more flowing style than ordinary earthbending, closer in feel to waterbending than to the rigid stances of the Hung Gar tradition, all sweeping motion and clouds of grain rather than hard blocks. The desert tribes ride the sand rather than fight it, gliding across the dunes on sand sailors, little wind and sailcraft that they propel by bending a constant spout of sand up into the sails. And Toph, who was humbled in that desert, went and mastered sand bending precisely because it had beaten her, turning the one terrain that blinded her into something she could command. The lore has her later in life bending sand into an entire towering replica of the city of Ba Sing Se just to show off, the desert that once left her lost reduced to a toy. I should flag, because we care about getting the categories right, that the wiki formally lists only a few named earthbending subskills, seismic sense, metal bending, and lava bending, and treats sand as a regional style rather than a separate art with its own name. The very fine control some benders show, moving dust and tiny pebbles, is the same, a matter of finesse rather than a distinct discipline. So I will not sell you sand bending as some fifth secret art. It is earthbending, adapted by people who had nothing but sand. There is one more corner of earthbending worth walking through, and it is where the element turns political, the Dai Li and their rock gloves. Deep inside Ba Sing Se, the enormous walled capital of the Earth Kingdom, there is an elite secret police force called the Dai Li. And their origin is one of the series' quiet ironies, because they were founded by Avatar Kyoshi herself, the same towering figure who made her island. Intended as protectors of the Earth Kingdom's cultural heritage, Kyoshi later regarded creating them as a mistake. And she was right, because over the centuries, the Dai Li curdled into exactly the kind of thing a secret police becomes. By the time of the series, they are the true power in Ba Sing Se, led by a cold, patient manipulator named Long Feng, and they have done something almost unbelievable. They have kept the entire 100-Year War a secret from the population of the largest city in the world, enforcing a rule that the war is simply never to be mentioned inside the walls, disappearing anyone who threatens the illusion, even controlling the Earth King as a puppet. Their bending style is the tell. The Dai Li fight with rock gloves, tiles of stone worn over their hands like great stone fists, which they launch across long distances to strike or to grab, used to scale sheer walls and clamp onto prisoners as cuffs. It is a precise, controlled, faintly sinister style, perfect for a secret police, grabbing and binding and vanishing rather than open battle. Its weakness is the honest one built into all earthbending. Another earthbender can simply shatter the rock, so the gloves are lethal against the unprepared and useless against a peer. And finally, the exotic materials, because earth is a wide word. The impurity rule that makes metal bending possible means that anything with enough earthy content in it can, in principle, be bent by the right master, and the show plays with this. Crystal and gemstone can be bent, coal, mud, and in one memorable case, a substance called genomite, nicknamed creeping crystal, an edible, glowing rock candy that grows to fill a cave, encountered in that same Cave of Two Lovers where we learned about Omashu. Reasoning from the rule, a perfectly pure crystal, like platinum, would be unbendable, though that is us following the logic rather than a line spoken on screen, so I hold it lightly. The point of all these materials is the same point the whole element keeps making. Earth is not just the gray boulder you picture. It is stone and metal and lava and sand and crystal and coal and the space rock that falls from the sky. And every one of those is fair game to a bender sensitive enough to feel the earth inside it. For an element whose entire reputation is being solid and simple and immovable, earth turns out to be the widest ranging of the four. And I think that is the real lesson of it. Nothing about the earth is as fixed as it looks. It only rewards the person willing to look twice. Fire is the element everyone thinks they understand, and almost everyone has it backwards, which is the whole tragedy the show is built around. If you only watched the first 2 books, you would come away certain that firebending is the element of aggression, destruction, rage, the weapon of a nation that burned the world. That is what firebending had become. It is not what firebending is, and the distance between those 2 things is one of the finest stories in the entire series. Start with how it actually works, because it is different from the other 3 in a way people miss. An earthbender draws on the ground, a waterbender on the nearby water, but a firebender generates the fire from within their own body. And the fuel for it is not muscle and it is not size, it is the breath. Firebending comes from the breath, from breathing exercises and breath control, which is why the very first thing any real teacher makes a student do is learn to breathe, and why a firebender's power rises and falls with their lungs and their calm, not their biceps. And the deeper truth, the one the war buried, is what fire actually represents, which is energy and life. Fire is the sun brought down to earth, warmth, light, the thing that lets things grow. It is not by nature a force of death at all. But during the 100-Year War, the Fire Nation lost that meaning almost completely and taught its soldiers to draw their flame from anger and hatred and the desire to dominate, fueling the fire with rage because rage burns hot and burns now. An entire nation forgot what its own element was for. The true origin sits underneath all of that, and Aang and Zuko go and find it together in one of my favorite episodes of the show, the Firebending Masters, in the 3rd book. The dragon is the original firebender. Long before humans, the dragons knew fire, and the first people to learn it were the Sun Warriors, an ancient civilization who learned the art directly from the dragons and understood it as a sacred, life-giving thing tied to the sun. By Aang's own time, the dragons are believed extinct, hunted to the last, because Fire Lord Sozin began a tradition of dragon hunting where killing a dragon was the ultimate proof of a firebender's greatness, and generations of hunters finished what he started, or so everyone believes. What Aang and Zuko discover, hidden away, is that the Sun Warriors are not entirely gone, and that 2 dragons still live, Ran and Shaw, the last 2, kept secret and protected. And when the 2 boys stand before these ancient masters, the dragons do not burn them. They circle them and breathe fire that is not orange but every color at once, a great spiraling rainbow of flame. And in that moment, Aang and Zuko understand the real meaning of firebending, that it is not rage, it is life, warmth, the pure energy of the sun. They learn the ancient form the Sun Warriors danced, the dancing dragon, a set of movements first developed by studying the dragons themselves, and they come away with a completely different fire than the one the war taught. I find this genuinely moving, the idea that the villain's element is the most misunderstood of the 4, that at its true root fire is the gentlest thing imaginable, the reason anything is warm and alive, and that a whole nation weaponized it by forgetting. There is one more secret folded into that, by the way, about Iroh, the old general known across the world as the Dragon of the West, a man famous for supposedly having killed the last dragon. The truth, revealed gently, is that Iroh found Ran and Shaw, learned their secret, and lied to the entire world that he had slain the last dragon precisely to protect them, to call off the hunt by declaring the prize already claimed. The greatest dragon slayer in Fire Nation history never killed a dragon at all. He became a legend for a murder he committed only in the telling, to keep 2 ancient masters safe. That is the kind of man Iroh is, and it is why he understands fire so much better than his brother ever did. Now the correction I owe you, because this channel has undersold Zuko before. It is easy, watching the early episodes, to read Zuko as a mediocre firebender, the angry failure prince who never quite measures up. That's wrong. From the very start of the series, Zuko is already a genuine firebending master, skilled and dangerous, and Avatar proves it early when he faces the ambitious Commander Zhao in a formal duel and defeats him cleanly. Zuko is not weak. What overshadows him is something almost no one could compete with, his younger sister Azula, a true prodigy, the kind of rare, precocious, once-in-a-generation talent whose fire is so controlled it burns blue. Standing next to Azula, anyone looks ordinary, but Zuko's struggle in the story is not a lack of skill, it is a crisis of source, because the fire he was taught to make comes from anger. And as he changes, as he turns away from his father and his rage, that old fuel stops working and his firebending actually weakens, because he no longer has the hatred it fed on. He has to go and find a new source for his fire entirely, the true source, life and drive and purpose rather than fury. And it is only after learning from the dragons that his firebending comes back stronger and cleaner than before, no longer dependent on being angry. By the end, he can stand toe-to-toe with Azula's blue flame in the final duel. His arc is not a weak bender getting strong, it is a strong bender learning where fire is supposed to come from. The nation is full of masters, and they show you the full range of what fire can be. There is Ozai, the Fire Lord, all domination and cruelty. There is Azula, the cold blue prodigy. There is Zhao, ambition without wisdom. And then there is Jeong, and he is the counterweight to all of them, a firebending master who deserted the army, a man who fears his own element. Jeong is the one who teaches Aang his first real firebending lesson, and what he teaches, before any strike, is breath and control and restraint, because Jeong understands fire as a destroyer that can turn on its wielder and everyone around them in an instant, and he treats it with dread. When Aang, impatient, bends fire carelessly and burns Katara's hands, which is the very burn that led her to discover healing, it seems to prove Jeong exactly right, that fire without discipline hurts the people you love. He is the living warning attached to the element, the master who wishes he had never had the gift. 2 more pieces complete the base of fire, and they are the mirror image of something we already saw with water. The first is the Agni Kai, the traditional Fire Nation honor duel, a formal firefight to settle disputes and restore honor, and it runs like a thread through the whole show, Zuko against Zhao, and most painfully the duel in Zuko's past, the one that scarred him, when as a boy he refused to fight his own father and Ozai burned half his face and banished him for the disrespect of it. The scar Zuko wears the entire series is the mark of an Agni Kai he would not fight. The second piece is the sun, and here is the mirror. Firebending draws on the sun the way waterbending draws on the moon. It is stronger by day, and it is amplified enormously by a rare comet, Sazin's comet, which passes roughly once a century and floods every firebender with the power, as Ozai puts it, of 100 suns. And it was under that comet that the worst things in this world were done, and under it that the final battle is fought. But the sun cuts both ways, exactly like the moon does. During a solar eclipse on the day of Black Sun, when the sun's face goes dark, firebending fails completely. Every firebender in the world stripped powerless for the length of the eclipse, which is the window King Bumi used to take back his city. So the 2 aggressive nations, fire and water, are secretly the 2 most dependent on the sky. Kill the moon and water dies. Blot out the sun and fire dies. The strongest benders in the world are, at the deepest level, borrowing their strength from a light they do not control, which is a very humbling thing to sit under. The flashiest thing fire can do is not really fire at all, in a sense. It is lightning, and lightning is where firebending becomes almost a different art with its own philosophy. And the philosophy is the strangest and most revealing in the whole show. The show calls lightning generation the cold-blooded fire, and it works like this. All the energy in the world, in the old idea the show borrows, divides into 2 opposing forces, a positive and a negative, a yin and a yang, and normally within a firebender these 2 are held together, balanced, at peace. To create lightning, the bender separates those 2 energies, pulls the positive and the negative apart inside themselves, deliberately creating an imbalance, a tension, and then guides them back toward each other. And when they finally crash together, the release is a bolt of lightning that the bender directs out through the fingertips. It is beautiful, and it is precise, and it is extraordinarily dangerous to the person doing it. And this is the twist that makes lightning the most interesting power in the series, and one of the details fans most love to check. Generating lightning requires a complete absence of emotion. To separate those 2 energies cleanly, the mind has to be totally calm, empty, still, at peace, with no turmoil, no anger, no fear, no conflict inside at all. any emotional storm and the energies will not part correctly and the whole thing fails, or worse, redirects back into the bender. Now think about what that means for who can actually do it. By the end of the war, only a handful of people in the world can generate lightning, and they come from the two opposite ends of the human spirit. On one end is Iroh, who can do it because he has found true inner peace, a genuine serenity earned through loss and reflection. And on the other end are Ozai and Azula, who can do it because they feel almost nothing at all, a cold, amoral emptiness where the peace should be. The serene monk and the pitiless prodigy arrive at the same power from opposite directions, one through wisdom and one through the absence of a conscience. That is the whole reason the tortured, striving, deeply emotional Zuko cannot generate lightning through the original series, and it is not because he is weak, it is because he is full of shame and love and anger and hope, all fighting each other. And lightning has no room for a person that alive inside. His inability to make lightning is the truest measure of his heart. The counter to lightning is where Iroh's real genius shows, because Iroh did not just learn to make lightning, he learned to survive it, and he did it by studying his enemies. Watching waterbenders redirect the force of an attack, flowing an incoming push back out rather than blocking it, Iroh worked out how to do the same thing with a bolt of lightning, and he invented lightning redirection. The technique is exact, and he first teaches it to his nephew Zuko in the episode called Bitter Work, and Zuko in turn passes it to Aang before the comet. When lightning comes at you, you do not block it, you accept it, catching the bolt on the fingertips of one hand, guiding it up the arm, down through the stomach, which he calls the Sea of Chi, the body's center, and then back up the other arm and out the other hand, letting it pass through you and away. And there is one lethal rule woven into it. The path must go through the stomach and must never cross the heart, because if the lightning passes through the heart, it will kill you. It is a technique that turns the deadliest attack in the world into something you can pour back out at the person who sent it. And before the war ended, only 3 people could do it: Iroh, who invented it, Zuko, whom he taught, and Aang. The show pays this off across 2 of its biggest moments, and the contrast between them is the whole ethical spine of lightning. Back in those catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se, Azula, cold and empty and therefore perfectly able, generates lightning and strikes Aang down with it just as he opens to the Avatar state. The wound the spirit water later heals. Cold-blooded fire used by the coldest person to nearly end the world. And then in the finale, 2 things happen that answer it. Zuko, standing against Azula, watches her aim a bolt, not at him but at Katara, and he throws himself into its path and takes the lightning himself to save her, catching it in his body but not redirecting it cleanly in time, and it very nearly kills him. And Aang, facing Ozai under the comet, is struck with the full lightning of the Fire Lord at the height of his power, and Aang does what Iroh taught, accepts the bolt, guides it through and out, and chooses, in that instant, not to send it back into Ozai's heart, releasing it harmlessly into the sky instead. Sit with the shape of that for a second. The villains of this world generate lightning because cruelty and emptiness make the calm it needs. The heroes redirect it because you cannot make lightning out of a heart that still feels things, but you can learn to survive what the cruel throw at you and choose not to answer in kind. Cruelty makes the bolt. Wisdom catches it and lets it go. There is a footnote here I want to be honest about because I care about not overselling. Iroh is, by every account in the lore, a lightning generator, and he is the one who understands the technique best of anyone. But the show is careful, almost sly about it. Iroh demonstrates the stance, teaches the theory, redirects lightning more than once, and yet you rarely, if ever, actually see him fire an offensive bolt of his own in combat. And I think that restraint is deliberate characterization. The man who understands lightning most deeply is the one least eager to throw it. He carries the deadliest technique in the world and keeps it mostly sheathed, and that tells you everything about the peace he found. And then, generations later, the legend of Korra does something almost cheeky with all of this hard-won mysticism. In Republic City, the modern industrial world Aang's peace helped build, lightning generation is no longer a rare spiritual feat achieved by a handful of the calmest or coldest people alive. It is a job. There is a power plant where rows of ordinary firebenders stand and generate lightning all day to make electricity for the city, mass producing the cold-blooded fire on a factory schedule. And one of Korra's closest friends, Mako, grew up working exactly that job to survive. The sacred, dangerous, emotionally demanding technique of the original series became, a lifetime later, a way to pay the rent and light the street lamps. I find that quietly perfect, honestly, as a picture of what peace does to magic. The bolt that Azula used to kill an avatar becomes the current humming in a light bulb. That is the whole promise of the world Aang was fighting for. That the terrible thing gets tamed into the ordinary thing and nobody even thinks about it anymore. Fire has one more rare and frightening branch, rarer even than lightning, and that is combustion bending. A combustion bender does not throw flame or lightning, they fire a concentrated beam of pure explosive energy from their forehead, focusing chi up from the stomach and out through a point marked by a tattoo of an eye in the center of the brow, releasing a blast that detonates whatever it hits with the force of a bomb at long range. It is the closest thing this world has to artillery carried inside a human body, and it is terrifying because it strikes from far away, blowing apart rock and buildings with a whistling shot. The best-known user in the original series is a silent, hulking bounty hunter the group nicknames Combustion Man, whose real name the show never actually reveals, hired to hunt Aang and nearly killing the whole group more than once with beams he fires from across a canyon. And the way he is finally stopped is one of my favorite defeats in the entire show, because it turns the power's own mechanics against it. The blast has to travel out through that third eye point on the forehead, which means the forehead is the choke point of the whole technique, the one place where the chi is funneled to a fine channel before it releases. Disrupt the flow right there at the source, and the energy has nowhere to go but back into the bender. And that is exactly what happens. In the middle of one of his attacks, Sokka, a non-bender with nothing but a boomerang, throws it and strikes Combustion Man precisely on the third eye tattoo, jamming the technique at the exact point of release, and the next blast he tries to fire misfires and detonates in his own face, killing him with his own power. A boy with a piece of curved wood beats a walking cannon by understanding how the cannon works. I love that the show lets a non-bender take down one of its most powerful benders with pure cleverness, aimed at the one vulnerable inch of a nearly unstoppable art. Combustion bending returns in The Legend of Korra in the form of a woman named Pili, part of that same dangerous group as the lava bender and the armless waterbender we met earlier. And she is even more dangerous than Combustion Man was, because she can do something he could not. Pili can curve her blasts, bending the trajectory of the explosive beam around cover and corners rather than only firing in a straight line, which takes away the one reliable defense against a combustion bender hiding behind something solid. And in a grim rhyme with her predecessor, she also dies to her own power in the end. Her final blast turned back on her at the worst moment. Combustion bending seems to carry a curse in its very design, an art of pure detonation undone twice by the fact that all that force has to pass through one fragile point on the person creating it. Away from the exotic and the deadly, fire has a whole set of gentler techniques that round out the element, and they matter because they are where you see fire as life rather than fire as a weapon. There is breath of fire, a warm-blooded technique of exhaling flame that comes straight from the breathing foundation used to warm the body, to keep going in the cold, taught in the sun warrior tradition Iroh carries. There is heat control, the ability to regulate warmth without ever producing a visible flame, and Iroh is the master of it, shown keeping himself perfectly warm and comfortable while imprisoned in a freezing cell, generating just enough heat inside his own body to be unbothered. Think about the range of that for a second. The same element that fires a bomb from a person's forehead can also just quietly keep an old man warm while he sits and drinks his tea in a cold prison. Fire is only ever as cruel or as kind as the person holding it. And then there is the pure spectacle end of it, propulsion. A skilled firebender can fire flame downward and backward from their hands and feet, with enough force to launch and steer themselves through the air, essentially flying on jets of their own fire. Azula is the great practitioner of this, using continuous blasts to glide and propel herself, and in the finale, under the full power of Sazen's comet, both Azula and Ozai take genuine flight, soaring on roaring streams of fire that the comet makes strong enough to hold them aloft. It is worth pausing on the contrast the show is quietly drawing, because it connects to something we will reach later tonight. There is more than one way to fly in this world, and fire's way could not be more different from air's way. A firebender flies by force, by sheer violent output, burning enough fuel fast enough to push against the world and stay up. It is loud, it is powerful, and it demands the comet's boost to work at all. When we get to airbending and to the rarest form of flight in the entire setting, hold this image, because the other kind of flight is the exact opposite of this one, achieved not by pushing harder than anything else, but by letting go of everything. Fire climbs into the sky by shouting at it. There's another element that gets there by going silent. So that is fire, whole, an element the world learned to fear as destruction. That is really the sun and warmth and life, corrupted by a war into a weapon of rage, and slowly, through 2 dragons and an old general and a scarred prince, remembered for what it always was. It can throw lightning born from an empty heart or catch that same lightning and forgive it. It can fire a bomb from a person's brow or keep a prisoner warm through a long, cold night. Of all 4 elements, it travels the greatest distance from what people assume it is to what it turns out to be. And I think that is why the redemption story of the whole series belongs to a firebender. Fire, more than anything, is the element that can be misunderstood and then understood and then reclaimed. That leaves the last of the 4, and in a way the first, because it is the element our whole story wakes up inside of: air. Airbending is the element of freedom, and its philosophy is the gentlest of the 4 by a wide margin. Where fire attacks and earth stands firm, airbending concentrates almost entirely on defense and evasion. An airbender's instinct is never to meet a blow, never to trade hit for hit, but to flow around it, to not be where the strike lands, to redirect and deflect and slip away, following the path of least resistance the way wind pours around a mountain rather than through it. The real-world style behind it is a Chinese martial art called Baguazhang, built on constant circular walking and spiraling motion, and if you watch Aang fight, you can see it. He is always moving, always circling, rarely planting himself, turning an opponent's aggression into wasted effort. It is the hardest art to pin down and the hardest to land a hit on, a whole discipline devoted to the idea that you win by not being caught. That gentleness was not just a fighting style, it was a way of life, because airbending belonged to the air nomads, and the air nomads lived more spiritually than anyone else in the world. They were wandering monks and nuns who owned little, avoided conflict wherever they could, and held a deep reverence for all life, a belief that harming another living thing was something to be avoided at nearly any cost. And there is a detail about them that is unique among all 4 nations. One I think is easy to skate past. Every single air nomad was a bender. In the water tribes, the earth kingdom, the fire nation, benders are a minority, born here and there among a population of non-benders. Not so with the air nomads. Every person born into that culture could bend air without exception, which made them less a nation with benders in it, and more a nation that simply was, it's bending. A whole people who were all, every one of them, airbenders. That fact is going to matter enormously and tragically when we come back to their story. Their origin follows the same beautiful pattern as the others. Airbenders learned from an animal, and the animal was the flying bison, the sky bison, the great gentle 6-legged creatures who bend the air naturally to lift their enormous bodies into the sky. The flying bison were the original airbenders, and humans learned the art by watching and living alongside them. Appa, Aang's companion, is one of these creatures, and the bond runs deep in the culture because traditionally each young airbender was paired with a sky bison for life, a lifelong companion. And the airbenders honored the debt as visibly as they possibly could. The arrow tattoos that a master airbender wears, the blue arrow running up the spine, over the crown of the head and down to the brow, and matching arrows on the hands and feet, are a direct tribute to the natural markings on a sky bison's own body. When you look at Aang's tattoos, you're looking at a picture of his teachers drawn onto his skin. The air nomads lived across 4 temples, and their arrangement tells you something about them. There were the northern and southern air temples, which housed the men, and the eastern and western air temples, which housed the women. 4 great monasteries perched on remote mountaintops and cliffsides, deliberately hard to reach, keeping the monks close to the sky and far from the entanglements of the world below. And within those temples, mastery was a formal thing. To become a master airbender and earn the arrow tattoos, a student traditionally had to pass 36 levels of airbending, 36 tiers of skill, a long and demanding ladder. Or, and this is the part that matters for Aang, a student could earn mastery by inventing an entirely new airbending technique of their own, an original move never seen before, which was considered proof enough of genius to skip the rest. Which brings us to Aang and to the single most important invention in airbending history, the air scooter. As a boy, before the war, Aang created a technique no one had ever managed, compressing air into a spinning ball beneath himself that he could balance and ride on, a whirling sphere of air that lets him zip across the ground and up walls at speed. It looks like a toy, and Aang certainly used it like one. But inventing it was a genuine feat of airbending genius, and it is the reason Aang became the youngest airbending master in history, earning his tattoos at only 12 years old, despite by some accounts not having formally passed every last one of the 36 tiers. He invented his way to mastery. A child so gifted, he skipped the ladder by building a new rung no one had thought of. His teacher and guardian through all of this was Monk Gyatso, a warm, playful, deeply kind old airbender who raised Aang more like a father than an instructor, and the relationship between them is one of the tenderest things in the show's backstory and one of the saddest for reasons we are about to reach. The techniques of air beyond the scooter are all built around that same principle of motion and evasion, but they scale up to real power. There are the basics, the gusts and sweeping blasts of wind used to knock enemies off their feet and clear a path. There is the glider staff, a wooden staff that opens into wings, which an airbender uses to actually fly, catching the currents and soaring. The standard way an airbender takes to the sky, and note that word, glider, because it is going to become important. There are air spouts and funnels, columns of spinning wind. An airbender can ride upward or fire outward like a ranged blast. There are air blades, compressed slices of air sharp enough to cut, and spheres and shields of spinning air used for defense. And an airbender can create suction and vacuum, pulling and pushing air in ways that do far more than fan a breeze. By and large, these are used exactly as the philosophy suggests: to defend, to escape, to disarm without killing, to keep the peace with the least harm possible. Aang spends most of the series using the hardest element in the world to catch, to avoid ever having to seriously hurt anyone, which is completely in keeping with everything the air nomads believed. But here is the thing about the gentlest element, the thing that gives airbending its terrible weight, and it is where we are heading next. An art built entirely around not harming can, in the wrong hands or the desperate ones, be turned into something that harms in a deeply intimate way. Air is not just the wind outside. It is the air in your lungs, the breath you are taking right now as you listen. And an element that can move air can, if its wielder is willing to cross a line the air nomads would have died rather than cross, move the air out of a person and refuse to let it back in. The gentlest art in the world holds, folded up inside it, one of the darkest powers in the entire setting, and to understand how that came to be, and to understand what happened to the people who would never have dreamed of using it, we have to talk about the day the air nomads died, and the thing I need to set straight about the boy who survived it. At the very start of the 100-Year War, in the year the calendars mark as 0, Fire Lord Sazin did something the world had never seen. He waited for Sazin's comet, the same comet that bears his name, the one that floods every firebender with the power of 100 suns, and when it came, he used that overwhelming boost to attack the air nomads, all 4 temples, and wipe them out. It was not a battle, it was an extermination, carried out with comet-enhanced fire against a pacifist people who had no army and no real defense and no allies to call, and it was deliberate, targeted genocide. And Sazin had a specific, chilling reason for choosing the air nomads first. He knew the Avatar cycle. He knew that the Avatar after Roku would be reborn an air nomad, and he meant to kill that child and every air nomad, so that the one force in the world capable of stopping him would be gone before it could grow up. He murdered an entire culture to try to murder a single reincarnating soul. The air nomads, the only nation where every person was a bender, went from a living civilization to almost nothing in a matter of days. Now the correction, because this channel has implied the wrong thing before and viewers were right to catch it. Aang did not witness the genocide. He did not live through it or watch his people die. What actually happened is that shortly before the attack, Aang, a 12-year-old boy, learned that he was the Avatar and felt the enormous weight of it crash down on him. And on top of that, faced being separated from Gyatso, the guardian he loved, and it was all too much, and he ran away. He fled the southern air temple on Appa in the middle of a storm, out over the open ocean, and the storm brought them down into the sea. And as he sank, drowning, terrified, Aang instinctively and half-consciously entered the Avatar state, that raw survival power, and it froze him and Appa inside a sphere of ice, an iceberg, preserving them alive but unconscious beneath the water. And there he stayed, frozen, for roughly 100 years, while up above him Sazon's comet fire fell on his people, and the war began and ground on for a century. Aang was already sealed in the ice before the attack came. He did not see it. He learned what had happened to the air nomads only after Katara and Sokka broke him out of that iceberg 100 years later, when he flew home to the southern air temple full of hope and found it empty, and found the remains of Gyatso and understood all at once, a century too late, that he was the last of his kind. The grief of the show's whole premise is not that Aang watched his world end. It is that he missed it, slept through it frozen, and woke to find it already 100 years gone. And he does not wake alone. Katara is right there beside him when the truth lands, which is its own small mercy folded into an enormous loss. So the air nomads were gone, their gentle, life-revering art nearly erased from the world, and the darkest thing about airbending is what it took for that art to be perverted into a weapon of killing. Because remember, air is breath, and in the legend of Korra, we finally see an airbender willing to do the unthinkable, a man named Zahir, who had become an airbender and an anarchist revolutionary, and who uses airbending to kill by suffocation. The technique is exactly as horrible as it sounds. An airbender who has abandoned the old morality can bend the air straight out of a victim's lungs and hold it away, or encase their head in a bubble of moving air with no oxygen in it, and simply let them suffocate, a death that comes in seconds. Zahir uses this to assassinate the Earth Queen, the ruler of Ba Sing Se, pulling the very breath out of her body in front of him, killing her without laying a hand on her. And the horror of it is precisely the contrast with everything the air nomads stood for. This is the discipline of a people who would not swat a fly, turned into a silent murder weapon by a man who took their power without their principles. It is the mirror image of bloodbending in a way, another gentle, life-connected element, breath instead of blood, weaponized against the body from the inside. I find it one of the more disturbing powers in the whole franchise for that reason. Not because it is flashy, but because of what it betrays. But Zahir also achieves the opposite pole of airbending, the highest and most beautiful thing the art can reach. And it is the rarest bending feat in the entire setting, true unassisted flight. I need to be precise here because people say airbenders can fly, and that is not quite right. Airbenders glide. They ride the wind on a glider staff, with wings catching currents. That is not flight, it is expert gliding, and it always needs the staff. True flight, actually lifting off and flying through the sky under your own power with nothing in your hands, no wings, no staff, no bison, has been achieved by only 2 airbenders in all of recorded history. The first was an ancient guru named Lagima, who lived thousands of years ago, a spiritual master who attained the ability to fly and who, in the legend, spent the last 40 years of his life never once touching the ground. And the second is Zahir. And the way Zahir reaches it is the whole philosophy of air taken to its final, devastating conclusion. Lagima left behind a poem, and it goes, "Let go your earthly tether, enter the void, empty, and become wind." Flight, in this reading, is not a technique you push harder to achieve. It is what happens when you release every attachment that binds you to the earth, when there is nothing left holding you down. And Zahir only manages it in the moment his beloved, Pili, the combustion bender, is killed in front of him. In his grief, having lost the last person he was attached to, the last thing tethering him to the world, he becomes completely unbound and he rises into the air and flies. think back to how a firebender flies, by force, by burning fuel and shouting against gravity under a comet. This is the exact opposite. The airbender flies by loss, by letting go of everything, by having nothing left to hold him down. Fire climbs the sky by pushing, air enters it by surrendering. That contrast is one of the more profound ideas the two series ever set side by side. And it only works because air, from the very beginning, was always the element of freedom. And there is no freedom more total or more terrible than having nothing left to lose. Air has one more spiritual reach, gentler than either killing or flying, and that is spiritual projection. The ability of a master with a deep spiritual connection to send their spirit out of their body to travel and act elsewhere while their body remains still. The master of this in the modern era is Jinora, Aang's granddaughter through his son Tenzin, a quiet, thoughtful, precociously spiritual girl who becomes the youngest airbending master shown in the new series, and who can project her spirit across great distances, an ability that grows especially strong around times of spiritual power. Her gift becomes crucial more than once, guiding lost spirits and reaching people her body could never get to. And she represents the good future of the art, the air nomad tradition reborn not as a weapon but as the spiritual, peaceful, questing thing it was always meant to be. Because the art did come back, and this is where a story that has been mostly tragedy turns, at last, toward wonder. In the year 171 after the war began, deep into Korra's era, there was another harmonic convergence, that once in 10,000-year cosmic alignment, and it changed the world. In the aftermath of it, something impossible began happening all over the globe. Ordinary people, Nonbenders, people who had never bent anything in their lives, spontaneously and without warning, gained the ability to airbend. It happened seemingly at random across every nation, a spark of the nearly extinct art reigniting in strangers. Among the newly airbending was Bumi, Aang's own eldest son, who had lived his whole life as the one non-bender child of the Avatar, and suddenly, in middle age, found the wind answering him. There was a spirited young thief named Kai, and Suyin Beifong's daughter Opal, and a humble, ordinary man named Da, and, in the bitter irony of it, Zahir himself, the killer, who became one of these new airbenders. Out of a genocide meant to erase airbending from the earth forever, 170 years later, the world simply started making new airbenders on its own, out of nowhere. And the Air Nation, which Sozin had reduced to a single frozen boy, was reborn as something new, no longer one bloodline but a scattered people gathered from every nation. It is the show's great answer to its own opening tragedy. You cannot, it turns out, kill an element. You can murder every last person who carries it, and the world will, given time, simply grow more. We have now walked through all four elements: water, earth, fire, and air, and every branch that grows off them, and if the world worked the way most people in it assume, that would be the whole map. But it's not, because there is an art older than all four, older than the Avatar, older than the split of the world into elements at all. And it is the one power that the entire story of the finale turns on. It is called energy bending, and it is worth slowing right down for, because almost nothing about it works the way the other bending arts do. Every art we have discussed tonight bends something outside the body. A waterbender bends water, an earthbender bends stone, a firebender generates and shapes flame, an airbender moves the wind. Even bloodbending, dark as it is still bending the water that happens to be inside a person. Energy bending bends none of those things. It reaches past the elements entirely and works directly on the energy, the life force, the very spirit inside a living person. And it predates everything else. Cast your mind all the way back to where we started tonight, to the lion turtles carrying whole cities on their backs and lending people elements before returning them to the spirit wilds. The lion turtles were the original energy benders. Before humans ever bent a single element, before the first Avatar, before the dragons taught fire or the badger moles taught earth, the lion turtles held this deeper art. The bending of energy itself and lending out the elements was only a downstream trick of it. Energy bending is the root that the whole tree grew from. It is the first magic. and by the era of the 2 series, it is all but forgotten, a lost art that survives in exactly one place, in the memory of the lion turtles. And it comes back into the story when things are as desperate as they ever get on the eve of the final battle. Aang is facing an impossible choice. Ozai, the Fire Lord, is about to use Sozin's comet to burn the entire Earth Kingdom to ash and crown himself ruler of a scorched world, and everyone around Aang, every past life he consults, tells him the same thing. To stop Ozai, you have to kill him. There is no other way. And Aang cannot accept it. He is the last air nomad, raised by monks who held all life sacred, and the idea of taking a life, even Ozai's, even to save the world, violates the deepest thing he is. He is genuinely stuck, torn between his duty to the world and the core of his own soul. And the past avatars have no answer for him except do what must be done. And then, the night before the comet, on a strange island that has drifted mysteriously close, Aang meets a lion turtle, an ancient, enormous, impossibly old lion turtle, the last of them, and it gives him a third option that none of his past lives ever mentioned, because it comes from before their time. It tells him that in the era before the Avatar, they bent not the elements but the energy within. And it presses its claw to Aang and passes the knowledge to him, the way its kind once granted fire to a frightened man at the very beginning of everything. But energy bending comes with a warning, and it is the most severe warning attached to any power in the entire franchise. The lion turtle tells Aang that to bend another person's energy, his own spirit must be unbendable, completely uncorruptible, or he himself will be corrupted and destroyed. Think about what that means. Every other art is a question of skill and training. This one is a question of the soul, and the test is total. When you reach into another person to bend their energy, your spirit and theirs press against each other. And if theirs is stronger, if your own will has any weakness, any crack, any corruption, you lose, and you are the one who is unmade. It is not a technique you can practice safely. It is a single, all-or-nothing gamble with your own spirit as the stake. And Aang does it in the final battle at the climax of everything. He pins Ozai, and instead of killing him, he takes hold of Ozai's energy, and for a terrible moment the two spirits grapple, and Ozai's dark, dominating will very nearly overwhelms Aang and destroys him, exactly as the lion turtle warned. And then Aang's spirit rises, unbending, and overpowers Ozai's completely. And the room fills with pillars of blue and white light pouring up out of both of them. And when it ends, Aang stands, and Ozai is left broken and defeated, and something is gone from him that no one had ever seen taken before. Aang has removed Ozai's firebending, permanently. The Fire Lord who is about to burn the world is left an ordinary man who can never bend again, disarmed not by death, but by having the fire reached into him and switched off at the level of his spirit. Aang found his third path. He ended the war without killing anyone, as Xenia planned, by using the oldest art in the world to take the thing that made Ozai dangerous, rather than the life that made him a person. And that permanence is the key rule of energy bending, the thing that separates it from everything else we have covered. When Aang strips Ozai's bending, it does not come back. It cannot be trained back or healed back or waited out. Bending removed by energy bending can only ever be restored by another energy bender, and there is essentially no one left who can do it, which makes the removal, in practice, forever. This is why it sits at the very top of a kind of hidden ladder that runs through this whole subject, and I want to lay that ladder out clearly, because the show is careful about it, and a lot of people blur the rungs together. There are 3 ways to take a person's bending away from them, and they are not the same. There is chai blocking, which we will come to, and which is temporary, wearing off in an hour or 2. There is bloodbending done with terrible precision, which we saw with Amon, which can shut bending off and seems permanent but is really a deep physical injury. And then there is energy bending, which reaches the spirit itself, and which is truly permanent, the deepest and most complete way to disarm a bender that exists. Surface, body, and soul. Energy bending is the soul level, and only the soul level can be undone by the same art in another's hands. Aang uses it more than once, and the second time is the callback I promised you earlier. Remember Yakone, the moonless bloodbender who bent an entire courtroom in broad daylight and nearly escaped justice? It was Aang who stopped him, and the way he stopped him was the same art. Aang reached into Yakone and energy bent his bending away, taking the blood bending out of him forever so he could never puppet another human being. Two of the darkest benders the world produced, Ozai and Yakone, were both finally disarmed, not by being killed, but by having the power itself removed at the root by the one man who carried the oldest art. There is a quiet symmetry in that, the gentlest soul in the world, the pacifist who would not kill, ending up as the only person alive able to truly take a monster's power away without taking his life. Now, one more thing I have to set straight, because this channel put it too strongly once before. For a very long time, the understanding was that the lion turtles were the only beings in all of history who could grant an element to a person born without it. That the loan of bending was a lion turtle power, and a lion turtle power alone. That turns out not to be the whole truth, and it comes from the newer Avatar material rather than the two original series, so I will flag the source plainly. In that wider lore, there is the story of an air nomad avatar named Sonam, from an age sometimes called the Golden Age of the Airbenders, who learned energy bending from the lion turtles, and used that knowledge to create an object, Sonam's staff, which could grant airbending to a person who had been born a Nonbender. The staff worked. Its first recipient was Sonam's own pupil, a young man named Taga, who received the gift of airbending from it, and who then stole the staff and turned against her, using the power she had given him for his own ends. And Sonam, racked with guilt over what she had unleashed, is said to have cut herself off from the Avatar cycle entirely, becoming a kind of lost legend. So the point, carefully stated, is this. The lion turtles were the original grantors of bending and the deepest source of it. But they were not, in the end, the only means by which a non-bender could be given an element. That door was opened at least once more by an avatar who then spent the rest of her existence regretting that she had opened it. It sits outside the two original series, further from what most viewers know, but it is a lovely and sobering footnote to the whole idea of bending as a gift that can be given, because it says the same thing the lion turtle said to Aang. This power is not safe. Handing it to the wrong spirit can destroy everything, including you. The last thing to say about energy bending is that it did not die with Aang. In Korra's era, after Amon uses his disguised bloodbending to strip the bending from person after person across Republic City, including from the fierce police chief Lin Beifong, it looks, for a while, like those people are gone from their own power forever, because ordinary healing cannot touch a severing like that. And then Korra, reaching a deeper spiritual place than she had ever gone, discovers that she too can energy bend, and one by one she restores the bending to Amon's victims, gives Lin her earth bending back, undoes the thing that was supposed to be undoable. She becomes the second energy bender we see restore rather than remove. And she is deliberate about it. She does not restore it to everyone. The hardened criminals whose bending was taken, she leaves debent, a choice with its own weight. But the innocent, the wronged, the people robbed of a part of themselves, she makes whole again, using the oldest art in the world not to disarm but to give back. And that, I think, is the truest expression of what energy bending is for. It is the art whose entire subject is the will and the spirit of the person wielding it, the one power that asks not how strong are your hands, but how unbendable is your soul. And in the right hands it can take a tyrant's fire or return a wrong woman's stone, both from the exact same place. There is one more way to shut a bender down, and it is the one that belongs to the people with no bending at all. Which is why I think it matters more than its modest reputation suggests. It is chai blocking. And the first thing to be clear about is that chai blocking is not bending. It is a martial art practiced by non-benders, an ordinary human skill, no spirit and no element involved. What it does is exploit the same thing that healing and bloodbending exploit, the network of chi paths running through the body, except a chai blocker does not use water or energy, only their own hands. By striking a rapid series of precise jabs at the right pressure points along a person's limbs and torso, a chai blocker interrupts the flow of chi, and the effect is immediate and, for a bender, catastrophic. The limbs go numb and useless, and crucially, the bending stops working. A firebender who has been chi-blocked cannot make fire. An earthbender cannot move a pebble. For a few minutes, they are just a person, disarmed by a series of taps from someone who cannot bend a thing. The great practitioner of it in the original series is Tai Li, and she is one of my favorite kinds of character, the one whose silliness hides something formidable. Tai Li is a former circus acrobat, bubbly, cheerful, endlessly flexible, part of Azula's small circle, and she moves like water, cartwheeling and flipping around a fight with an ease that makes her nearly impossible to hit. And while everyone is distracted by how bouncy and harmless she seems, she is darting in and out, landing those little jabs, and one by one, the strongest benders in a battle simply stop being able to bend, dropping to the ground with dead arms, completely bewildered. She can take Azula herself down with it, which she eventually does, a non-bender acrobat neutralizing a lightning-throwing prodigy with her bare fingers. Later, Tai Li even teaches the technique to the Kyoshi warriors, spreading this quiet equalizer among a group of skilled non-bending women. And I love the poetry of that. The humblest fighters in the world learning the one skill that can bring the mightiest benders down to size. That word equalizer is where chi blocking stops being a neat trick and becomes one of the central ideas of the entire second series, because the legend of Korra takes this small art and builds a revolution on it. By Korra's time in the crowded modern city, the gap between benders and non-benders has become a genuine social wound. Benders hold the power, the police, the crime, the sport, the wealth, and non-benders, half the population or more, live underneath all of it, feeling like second-class citizens in their own city, at the mercy of anyone who can throw fire or fling a rock. And a movement rises out of that grievance, the equalists, an uprising of non-benders demanding to be treated as equals. And their weapon of choice is chi blocking, taught and drilled among their ranks so that ordinary people can walk up to a bender and take away the very thing that made them untouchable. For the first time, the powerless have a way to fight back, hand to hand, no bending required. And whatever you think of where the movement goes, and it goes to dark places under Amon, the grievance underneath it is real, and the show refuses to pretend otherwise. Bending, this whole subject we have spent the night on, is not only a wonder, it is also a profound imbalance of power, a thing some people are simply born with and most people are not. And chi blocking is the art of the ones who were not. The equalists industrialize it too, which is where it connects to the modern world we will finish on. Chi blocking with bare hands takes real skill and years of training. So the equalists supplement it with technology, electrified gloves, and shock weapons that jolt a bender's nervous system and drop them the same way a chi block would, only faster and requiring far less training. A person who could never master the delicate art of the pressure points can still, with a charged glove, walk up and put a firebender on the ground. It is chi blocking made mechanical, the equalizing power taken out of the hands of a rare few acrobats, and mass-produced for anyone angry enough to use it. And that leads us to remember the full ladder of shutting, bending down that runs through everything tonight, 3 rungs deep. Chi blocking is the top rung, the shallowest, temporary, physical, wearing off in an hour, available to non-benders. Beneath it is the severing that looks permanent, whether it is Amon's precise bloodbending dressed as a spiritual gift, a deep injury to the body's ability to bend. And at the very bottom, the deepest and truest, is energy bending, the removal of bending at the level of the spirit, which only another energy bender can ever reverse. Surface, body, and soul. A tap of the fingers, a grip of blood, and a wrestling of spirits, 3 completely different powers aimed at the same target, the taking away of a person's bending, and the series keeps them meticulously distinct. But I keep coming back to Tai Li cartwheeling through a battle because she is the humane heart of this whole idea. Chi blocking is the reminder, folded into a story about extraordinary powers, that the extraordinary is never as untouchable as it thinks. The blue fire prodigy and the acrobat with no bending at all share one nervous system, one set of chi paths, one body that can be reached and switched off by a person willing to learn where to press. For all the cosmic weight of lion turtles and avatars and comets, the mightiest bender in any room can be undone by someone with quick hands and no power whatsoever. And there is something deeply right about that. A built-in humility at the center of a world of gods and monsters. No one in this world is ever truly above being brought back down to earth, which brings us at last to the one exception to the deepest rule of the whole system. The person we have been circling all night. Everything we have covered rests on an iron law, and I want to state it as plainly as I can because it is the load-bearing rule of this entire world. One person, one element. A human being is born able to bend a single element, the element of their nation, and that is the one they will bend for their entire life, and no ordinary person ever learns a second base element. Everything we have looked at that seems like more than that is not a second element. It is a branch of the one you already have. Metal bending and lava bending and sand bending are all still earth. Blood bending and healing and ice bending and plant bending are all still water. Lightning and combustion are still fire. Suffocation and flight are still air. A master can go astonishingly deep into their own element and find powers that look like sorcery, but they can never step sideways into another one. The waterbender will never throw fire. The earthbender will never fly on the wind. That wall between the elements is absolute, and it is the thing that makes the four nations rather than one blur of magic. Except for one person in each generation who breaks the wall completely. The Avatar. The Avatar is the single individual in all the world who can bend all four elements, and the reason why goes all the way back to where we began tonight, to Wan and Raava. When the first Avatar fused permanently with the Spirit of Light, he became a bridge, a human being carrying a great spirit inside them, and that fusion is what lets the Avatar reach past the wall that hems in everyone else and touch all four elements at once. The Avatar is not simply a very talented bender. The Avatar is a different kind of being, a person and a spirit bound together, reincarnating down the ages. And the four-element mastery is the outward sign of that inner fusion. Everyone else bends a piece of the world. The Avatar, through Raava, is connected to the whole of it. And even the Avatar has to learn the four the hard way, in order. And the order carries a lesson we touched on at the very start. An Avatar begins with their birth element, the one that comes naturally and then moves through the others. And somewhere in that sequence, they must master the element that is the true opposite of their own temperament. And that is always the hardest thing they ever do. For Aang, the Airbender, freedom itself, all evasion and lightness and going around, the Great Wall was earth, the element of standing your ground and meeting force head-on and refusing to move. Everything Aang was by nature, earth demanded he stop being. He could not earthbend by dodging. He had to plant himself and be immovable, the one thing his whole spirit resisted, and his struggle to learn it under Toph is the story of a free soul being taught to hold still. Every Avatar faces some version of that, a confrontation with the element that is everything they are not. And the design of it is beautiful because it means the Avatar cannot just be powerful. They have to become whole, have to grow into the parts of themselves that do not come naturally. Balance is not a slogan for the Avatar, it is the curriculum. Then there is the Avatar state, and this is where the power becomes almost frightening. The Avatar state is a defense mechanism and a wellspring both. A state the Avatar can enter, sometimes by choice, and sometimes triggered automatically by mortal danger, in which they are flooded with the combined skill, knowledge, wisdom, and raw energy of every single Avatar who came before them. Thousands of lifetimes of mastery pouring into one body at once. The eyes and the tattoos blaze white, and in that state the Avatar can do things no bender could ever do alone. Bend all four elements with overwhelming force. Tap powers their current life never learned. Become, for a few moments, the concentrated might of the entire Avatar line. We saw it the very first time we met Aang, when the ocean of his own drowning triggered it and it froze him in the iceberg, and again when he carved his way out, and again when it turned him into a towering fusion with the ocean spirit at the North Pole. It is the closest thing to a trump card the good side of this world has. But it comes with a cost, and the cost is the darkest rule in all of Avatar lore, and it is the thing I most want you to sit with tonight. The Avatar state makes the Avatar overwhelmingly powerful, and in the same instant, catastrophically vulnerable because of a single fatal rule. If the Avatar is killed while in the Avatar state, the reincarnation cycle breaks. Permanently. Not for one lifetime, not until things are set right. Forever. Because in the avatar state, the connection to all the past lives is fully open, laid bare, and if the avatar dies with that connection open, the chain of every past life snaps at once, and Raava, the light spirit at the center of it, is destroyed along with them, and no new avatar is ever born again. The one being capable of keeping the world in balance would simply cease to exist for all of time. Every power we have talked about tonight would go on, water and fire and earth and air, but the person who bends all four, the bridge to the spirits, the balance point of the world, would be gone and never return. Sit with that for a moment, because it means the avatar's greatest power is inseparable from the only way the avatar can be lost completely. To reach for the full might of every life you have ever lived is to open the one door through which all of them can be killed at once, and the show does not leave that as an abstraction. It brings the world to the very edge of it twice. The first time is the moment we keep returning to, in the caverns under Ba Sing Se, when Aang, trying to reach the avatar state by choice, opens himself fully to it at the exact instant Azula's lightning finds him. He is struck down in the avatar state. The cycle very nearly ends right there, in a cave, with a girl and a bolt of cold fire, and it is only the last of the spirit water, the moon, and ocean's own gift that pulls him back from a death that would have erased every avatar who would ever have followed him. Think about how close that was, not just Aang's life, but every future avatar, every Korra, unborn and unmade, hanging on a vial of water in Katara's hands. The second time is in Korra's era, and it is even more deliberate because this time someone understands the rule and tries to use it. The dangerous group we have met in pieces all night, the lava bender and the combustion bender and the armless waterbender and their leader, the airbending anarchist. They are called the Red Lotus, and their goal is not simply to kill Korra. It is to end the avatar itself, to remove the institution from the world entirely, so that their vision of a world without central authority can take root. And they know exactly how to do it. They capture Korra and force a specific poison into her, a metallic poison that drives her involuntarily into the avatar state, precisely so that they can kill her while she is in it and break the cycle forever. They are not trying to murder a woman, they are trying to murder every avatar who would ever exist, using the one rule that makes it possible, turning the avatar's greatest power into the instrument of the avatar's final death. Korra survives, but barely, and not unmarked, and the fact that her enemies came at her through that exact door tells you how load-bearing the rule really is. The avatar state is the summit of everything a bender can be, all four elements and 1,000 lifetimes in one glowing body. And it is also always the open door to the end of everything. The greatest power in the world and its single deepest vulnerability are the same thing, worn by the same person, and you cannot have one without the other. I said the avatar cycle could only be broken by the death of an avatar in the avatar state, and that this had never actually happened, only threatened. That is true. But there is a second way the cycle can break, one nobody in Aang's era knew was possible, and it does happen to Korra. And understanding it means going back one final time to the two spirits at the root of everything, Raava and Vaatu, the light and the dark bound together, the pair whose 10,000-year battle at harmonic convergence decides the fate of each age. Wan fused with Raava, the light, and became the first avatar, and every avatar since has carried Raava inside them. That is the engine of the whole cycle. But Vaatu, the dark, was never destroyed, only imprisoned, sealed away by Wan at the close of that first great struggle, waiting. And in Korra's time, a man goes looking to set it free. Unalaq, Korra's uncle, the spirit bender we met earlier, the one who taught her to soothe and to corrupt spirits with a stream of glowing water, turns out to have been playing a very long game. He does not want balance. He wants to free Vaatu and join with him. And at the harmonic convergence that falls during Korra's story in the year 171 after the war began, he does exactly that. He fuses with Vaatu the way Wan fused with Raava 10,000 years before, and he becomes a thing that should not exist, the dark avatar, the mirror image of everything the avatar is meant to be, a human bound not to the spirit of light but to the spirit of chaos. And he sets out to unmake the world Wan built. It is one of the boldest ideas the second series ever reaches for. The revelation that the avatar was only ever one half of a possibility, and that the other half, the shadow avatar, was always available to anyone willing to free the darkness and let it in. The battle between Korra and the Dark Avatar is where the cycle actually breaks, and it is a truly different kind of break from the one Roku warned about. In the fight, Vaatu gets hold of Raava, the light spirit inside Korra, and tears her out of Korra's body, and then does something that had never been shown before. He begins to destroy Raava, and as Raava is battered and unmade, we see the consequence ripple backward through the entire Avatar line. Korra's connection to her past lives lights up, and then one by one they begin to vanish. Aang flickers and is gone. Roku, gone. Kyoshi, Kuruk, Yangchen, back and back through the ages. Every avatar who ever lived winking out of existence, all the way down to Wan himself. The whole chain of thousands of lifetimes erased in moments as the light spirit that connected them is torn apart. It is a devastating thing to watch, the visible death of 10,000 years of memory, and it is the closest the world ever comes to the true ending Roku described, an avatar line snuffed out. But it does not fully end, and this is the distinction I want to draw clearly, because the two cycle breaks are not the same and people conflate them. Roku's rule, death in the avatar state, would have ended the avatar completely and forever. Raava destroyed with no way back, no more avatars ever. That never actually happens. What happens to Korra is adjacent to it, but survivable, just barely. Because a fragment of Raava's light still remained inside Korra even after the tearing, the smallest ember of it, and Korra, in a moment of enormous spiritual strength, reaches into the cosmos as a vast projection of her own spirit, a towering figure of blue light, and finds that surviving spark of Raava and restores her, rebuilds the light spirit from the last piece of her. And the two refuse and the avatar goes on. Korra remains the avatar. The cycle continues into the future, but the price was paid and it was not paid back. The connection to all of her past lives, severed when Raava was torn out and the old chain destroyed, is gone for good. Korra can no longer call on Aang for guidance, or Roku, or Kyoshi, or any of the thousands who came before. That library of wisdom, the counsel of every previous life that Aang leaned on again and again, is simply closed to her, forever. The Avatar survived, but the Avatar's memory did not. And that, for me, is the part that gets me about Korra's whole story, more than any battle in it. She becomes in effect the first of a new line. Everything before her is cut away, where every Avatar for 10,000 years could reach back and feel the presence of all the others behind them, an unbroken company of past selves. Korra stands at the front of an empty hall, the beginning of a fresh cycle with no ancestors to turn to. The Avatar who spent her entire life fighting the hardest to prove she was worthy of the title, who was brash and headstrong and desperate to be enough, ends up the loneliest Avatar of all, the one who has to figure it out with no past lives whispering in her ear, entirely on her own. There is a terrible poetry in that. The hardest driving Avatar, stripped of the very inheritance that made the role bearable, left to be strong the only way that was ever truly hers, alone. There is a bookend to all of this that I find beautiful, and it closes the loop we opened at the very start of the night. Long, long ago, at the end of the first harmonic convergence, Wan did something to protect the world. He closed the spirit portals, the great gateways between the human world and the spirit world, sealing the two worlds apart so that spirits and humans would stop tearing at each other, and for 10,000 years those worlds stayed separated. It was Wan's parting gift and his parting sorrow, a wall between two things that had once been one. And at the end of Korra's confrontation with the darkness, standing where all of this began, Korra makes the opposite choice. She leaves the spirit portals open, she reunites the human world and the spirit world that Wan had kept apart, deliberately letting spirits back into the cities and the streets, undoing the separation the first Avatar made. The first Avatar closed the door to keep the peace. The newest Avatar opened it again, betting that the world was finally ready to live alongside what it had shut out. Wan and Korra, the very first link and what is effectively a new first link, bookending 10,000 years, one sealing the worlds apart and the other letting them back together. And Korra does it, having lost the memory of every Avatar in between, including Wan himself, so she does not even know in that moment that she is answering a choice her own oldest life made at the dawn of the cycle. She just feels in her severed and lonely and unbroken spirit that it is time to open the door. That is where the long history of bending, from a borrowed flame in a frightened man's hand to a woman of light rebuilding a spirit from a single spark, finally arrives. Not at an ending, at a new beginning made by the loneliest person ever to carry the role. I want to spend our last real stretch tonight on what became of all this power once the war was over, because the arc of bending across the two series is one of the quiet marvels of the whole franchise, and it is easy to miss if you only think of these arts as tools for fighting. Remember where bending started. It began as survival, an element lent by a lion turtle, so a frightened person could walk into the spirit wilds and gather food and come home alive. Then, for 100 years, it became a weapon, the engine of a world war, fire against water and earth, benders as soldiers and generals and instruments of conquest. And then Aang won, and the war ended, and the world had to work out what to do with all this power in a time of peace. The answer, over the 70 years between the two series, is one of the more interesting things the story ever does. Bending became civilization. The clearest symbol of it is a city Aang and Zuko built together, Republic City, a great modern metropolis founded deliberately as a place where people of every nation and every element could live side by side, no longer divided into 4 separate worlds. And in that city, bending is woven into ordinary life in a way that would have been unthinkable during the war. We already saw that lightning generation, the sacred cold-blooded fire that only a handful of the calmest or coldest souls could produce, became a factory job at the power plant. Benders standing in rows making electricity to light the streets. We saw metal bending, one blind girl's impossible escape, become a whole police force zipping across rooftops on cables. That is the pattern everywhere you look. The terrible powers of the war did not disappear. They got domesticated, folded into the machinery of a working city, turned from weapons into infrastructure. Nowhere is that clearer than in what became a national obsession, pro-bending. In Korra's era, the great arena sport is a game where 2 teams of 3, each with a waterbender, an earthbender, and a firebender, face off on a raised platform and try to knock each other back across a series of zones using their bending, all of it governed by strict rules about which moves are allowed and where you can aim. Airbending is absent from it, of course, because the airbenders were still all but gone when the sport was born. It is bending as spectacle, bending as entertainment, benders as celebrity athletes cheered by roaring crowds who bet on the matches and buy tickets and follow their favorite teams. Think about that distance. The fire that burned the air temples, the water that fought the siege of the north, the earth that held the walls of Ba Sing Se, all of it reduced in peacetime to a spectator sport played for trophies in a stadium. Korra herself falls in love with the game when she first arrives in the city, and I think the show is making a gentle point through her delight that this is what peace looks like, the deadliest arts in the world becoming something children collect posters of. But peace is never simple, and the modern era also produces the counterweight to all this bending power, which is technology. This is the age of the machine, of factories and automobiles and radio, and clever non-benders begin to build devices that can stand toe-to-toe with benders for the first time in history. The great industrialist Hiroshi Sato, secretly backing the equalist movement we discussed, designs the electrified glove that drops a bender like a chai block, and beyond that, machines of war, mecha tanks, armored suits piloted by ordinary people that can grapple and outmuscle. Even skilled benders, spraying them with those same disabling shocks. For the first time, the imbalance that had defined the entire world, the gap between the person born with power and the person born without, could be closed with an engine and a wrench rather than a rare spiritual gift. It is a profound shift, and the series takes it seriously as both a threat and a kind of justice. The non-benders were tired of being at the mercy of the gifted, and technology was the great leveler, the thing that finally let the powerless build their own power in a workshop. The two forces, bending and technology, keep colliding right through to the end, and they reach their most alarming fusion in the final story, with Kuvira, the master metal bender turned conqueror we met earlier. Kuvira gets hold of the spirit vines, the strange, powerful growths of pure spiritual energy that spread into the world after Korra left the spirit portals open, and she does something monstrous with them. She harnesses that raw spirit energy as a weapon, building an enormous cannon that fires a beam of concentrated spirit power capable of vaporizing whatever it hits. And she mounts it on a colossal metal war machine, a giant mecha the size of a building, bent and piloted using her own metal bending mastery. It is the whole arc of the modern era condensed into one terrifying image: ancient spiritual energy and cutting-edge machinery and the refined descendant of Toph's improvised art, all welded together into a single weapon of conquest. Bending and technology and the spirit world, the three great forces of the setting, fused into one thing pointed at a city. The war that Aang ended keeps trying to be reborn in new forms, wearing the face of whatever the age has invented. And running alongside all of that gently is the rebirth we already followed, the new Air Nation. After the world started spontaneously making airbenders again, Aang's son Tenzin, who for most of his life carried the almost unbearable weight of being the only person keeping the entire airbending culture alive, suddenly found himself with a whole nation of new students, strangers from every corner of the world who had woken up one morning able to bend the wind. And they made a choice about what to be. Rather than rebuild the old isolated temples and keep to themselves, the new Air Nation chose to become something the air nomads had once been at their best. Wanderers, helpers, a nomadic people moving through the world to keep the peace and aid wherever they were needed. A floating force of gentle power in an age of machines and conquerors. Of the four great bending cultures, the one that was targeted for extinction first is the one that comes back with the clearest sense of purpose. An entire people reborn to serve rather than to rule. There is a rightness to that which I find deeply moving, that the gentlest art, the one built entirely around causing no harm, is the one the world chose to resurrect and hand a second chance. So follow the whole journey of bending one last time all the way through. It began as a loan from an ancient beast, a survival tool given and returned at the door. It was stolen and kept by one desperate thief and became the birthright of a fractured world. It was sharpened into the weapon of a 100-year war. And then, in peace, it became a sport, a police force, a power grid, a war between the gifted and the machines, and finally a wandering nation of peacekeepers, and a world where spirits walk the streets of a human city again. The same power, water and earth and fire and air and the older art beneath them, carried from the dawn of the spirit wilds all the way to a neon-lit modern metropolis, changing its meaning at every step while never once changing what it fundamentally was. That is the real subject of everything we have talked about tonight. Not just how each element works, but what a world does with power once it has it, and how the meaning of a gift depends entirely on the hands that hold it. Before we let the night settle toward its close, I want to draw the four elements back together and look at them as a whole. Because one of the reasons Avatar has held on to people for so long is that the bending was never really about the fighting. Each of the four arts is a philosophy first and a weapon second, a way of being in the world dressed up as a way of moving it. And when you lay them side by side, you can see that they are not four random powers. They are four answers to the same question. How do you meet a world that is always pushing against you? Water answers, yield. The waterbender does not resist the force coming at them. They flow around it and turn it back. They change their shape to fit whatever the moment demands, liquid to ice to mist and back again. The deepest strength of water is its refusal to stay fixed, its willingness to become whatever it needs to be. And the people who bend it best, Katara above all, are the ones who understand that flexibility is not weakness, that bending like the reed rather than standing like the oak is its own kind of power. Water is the element of change and a feeling tied to the moon and the tides and to the moisture in living things. And it is no accident that it is the element most associated with both healing and love, and also with the darkest intimate violation in the world. To be that connected to life is to be able to mend it and to seize it. The waterbender's lesson is that the most adaptable thing in the room usually wins, and that the same openness that lets you heal is the openness that could let you harm. Earth answers, endure. The earthbender does not flow and does not flee. They plant themselves and become immovable. And they wait. We spent real time on neutral Jing, the patience that looks like doing nothing right up until it becomes an avalanche. And that patience is the whole soul of the element. Earth is substance, weight, the ground that holds everything else up, and its benders are, at their best, the steadiest people in any story, the ones who meet a problem head-on and refuse to be moved off what they know. But the twist the series keeps returning to, from Toph feeling a lie through the floor to a girl bending the impurity inside a cage, is that Earth also rewards a second look, that nothing about it is as fixed as it appears, and that the element everyone takes for rigid is secretly the cleverest of the four, hiding metal and lava and sand and crystal inside what looks like a plain gray rock. Earth's lesson is that strength is not the same as stubbornness, that real solidity includes the patience to wait and the imagination to find the crack no one else can feel. Fire answers, act. The firebender does not wait and does not yield. They move forward, they generate their own power from within, they burn. And we followed the long road of fire from its corruption to its truth, from an element the world learned to fear as pure destruction to what it always was underneath, energy and warmth and life, the sun brought down to earth. Fire is drive and will and passion, and the danger of it is exactly the danger of those things. That passion curdles so easily into rage that the same fire that gives life can consume everything around it if its wielder draws it from hate. The whole redemption arc of the series belongs to a firebender for a reason, because fire is the element that most needs to understand where its own power comes from. Drawn from anger, it weakens and destroys. Drawn from life and purpose, it grows clean and strong. Fire's lesson is that raw power is never enough, that what matters is the source you feed it from, and that the difference between a warlord and a warm hearth is not the flame, it is the heart behind it. And air answers, release. The airbender does not meet force at all. They are simply never where the blow lands. They move around everything. They let go. Air is freedom, the lightest and most spiritual of the four. The element of a people who owned almost nothing and revered all life, and its highest expression, true flight, comes not from pushing harder than anyone, but from letting go of every last thing that ties you down. We saw how that gentleness holds a terrible edge, that an art built entirely around causing no harm can be perverted into pulling the breath from a living body. And we saw that the same detachment that lets an airbender rise into the sky is a detachment from the world, and its attachments that can tip into something cold. Air's lesson is the hardest of the four to hold, that the way through most conflicts is not to win them but to refuse to be caught in them, and that freedom taken all the way to its end means having nothing left to lose, which is either the highest enlightenment there is or the loneliest, depending on how you got there. There is a pattern hiding in the branches too, once you have all of them laid out side by side, and I think it is the loveliest symmetry in the whole system. Every element grows two kinds of sub-art, and they sit on opposite sides of the same power. Each one has a branch that nurtures and a branch that harms, a light growth and a dark one, springing from the very same root. Water grows healing on the one hand, the art of mending a body from within, and bloodbending on the other, the art of seizing a body against its will. And they are the same insight exactly. The water inside living things simply turn to opposite ends by opposite hearts. Earth grows metal bending, the art that built cities and police forces and a whole civilization out of what everyone swore was impossible. And it turns that same buried sensitivity into an instrument of conquest in a warlord's hands. Fire grows the warm hearth and the breath that keeps a man alive in a freezing cell. And it grows the lightning bolt and the exploding third eye, the killing edges of the very same flame. And air, gentlest of the four, grows the spiritual projection of a girl sending her spirit across the world to guide the lost, and it grows suffocation. The pulling of the breath out of a living body, both of them flowing from the same mastery of the air that moves through everything that breathes. It is as if each element, as a bender follows it deeper and deeper, eventually arrives at a fork, and one path leads toward giving and the other toward taking. And which path you walk says almost nothing about the element and almost everything about you. Healing and bloodbending are the same distance down the same road, and so are the warm hand and the lightning, and so are the reaching spirit and the stolen breath. The power itself is never good or evil. It waits, neutral, at the fork, and it becomes whatever the person holding it already was before they ever got there. That, more than any single technique, is the quiet moral running underneath every branch we have followed tonight. The deepest secret of each of the four arts turns out to be a mirror, and the thing it shows you when you finally go far enough in is your own face. The gentlest people find the giving branch waiting for them, and the cruelest find the taking one, and the element never once decides which. You do. Now set them against each other and you see the design. The elements are arranged as opposites. Water and fire are opposites, the yielding and the acting, the cool and the hot, the one that flows and the one that burns, and their benders are strongest at opposite times. Water peaking under the full moon at night, fire peaking under the sun by day, each one dimmed when the other's light rules the sky. Earth and air are opposites too, the immovable and the untouchable, the one that stands its ground and the one that is never on the ground at all, the heaviest element and the lightest. And that opposition is the whole reason the Avatar's path is what it is, because the Avatar must master not just their birth element, but its opposite, must become the thing that is hardest for them to be. The free spirit must learn to stand firm. The stubborn soul must learn to bend. It is balance made into a discipline, and it is why the Avatar, when they are whole, is not just powerful but complete. A person who has had to grow into all four ways of meeting the world, the yielding and the enduring and the acting and the releasing all at once. And that completeness is echoed in the great masters, each of whom tends to embody the pure spirit of their art. Think across the ones we have met tonight. Katara, water, whose flexibility and fierce love let her both heal and fight, and who refused every rule that tried to fix her in place. Toph, earth, immovable and blunt, and secretly the cleverest bender alive, who felt the world through her feet and reshaped what earth could do. Iroh, fire at its wisest, who understood the element so deeply he could catch lightning and choose not to throw it. Aang, air, the gentlest soul in the world, who ended a war without taking a life. And around them the ancient avatars whose names drift through the lore, the fierce and towering Kyoshi, the revered and serene Yangchen, each one a different balance of the four, each one having walked the same hard road from their own nature to its opposite. The masters are not just strong, they are, each of them, the clearest expression of what their element believes about how to live. And the Avatar is the rare soul who has to believe all four things at once and somehow not be torn apart by the contradiction. That, in the end, is what bending is really a story about. Not moving rocks and water and flame, but four different answers to how a person should meet a hard world, and the endless work of holding them in balance. Since the promise of tonight was every bending style explained, I owe you one more thing before we drift off, which is a little honesty about the edges, about the powers people are sure exist and do not, and the ones that get mislabeled because a complete map has to mark where the roads actually end. Fans have invented a great deal over the years, and some of it has been repeated so often that it starts to feel canon, and I want to gently set a few of those straight, carefully, because getting this right is the whole point of a video like this. Start with the ones that simply are not real. There is no such thing as sound bending. It sounds plausible. An airbender shaping sound waves through the air, and fans have imagined it. But it appears nowhere in the actual canon of the shows, and it is worth saying plainly so you do not go looking for it. There is no separate art called sunbending either. Firebending grows stronger with the sun and explodes in power under Sazin's comet. But the sun is a source of strength, not a distinct thing you bend, and there is no bender who commands sunlight as its own element. In the same way, be careful with the phrase dust bending, because the fine control some earthbenders show over sand and dust and tiny pebbles is real, but the wiki does not list it as a formal, named subskill the way it lists the true branches of earth. And on that note, let me be precise about what the actual recognized subskills of earthbending are, because it is a short and specific list. Seismic sense, metal bending, and lava bending, that is the canonical set. Sandbending is best understood as a regional style, a way the desert tribes adapted ordinary earthbending to loose ground, rather than a fourth named art. And the very fine dust and pebble work is a matter of a master's finesse rather than a separate discipline with its own name. A few more small corrections because they come up constantly. There is no figure called the Lightning Lord, despite how often the phrase gets thrown around, most likely a muddle of lightning and fire lord in someone's memory. The molten rock art is properly called lava bending in canon, not magma bending, which is a fan-coined synonym that has spread widely but is not the show's own term, so if you want to be exactly right, Lava bending is the word. And that armless waterbender we admired earlier, Ming Hua, whose control was so effortless it barely looked like effort, is sometimes described with the label psychic waterbending. But that terminology is loose and unofficial, so I described only what is certain, what she actually does on screen, which is form and freeze and wield her own water arms. When the exact name is uncertain, it is always better to tell you what you can see than to hand you a label that might not hold up. Then there are the things that look like bending but are not, and these matter for a clear map. Sokka's famous sword, the black blade he forges from a fallen meteor, is not being bent, ever. Sokka is not a bender at all. The meteorite it is made from is, in principle, a bendable metal because it carries plenty of earthy impurity. But the sword itself is only ever a forged blade swung by a clever non-bender. And it is important not to let the space rock fool you into thinking there is bending involved. Chi blocking, which we gave a whole stretch of the night to, is likewise not bending. It is a non-bender's martial art aimed at bending, the reverse of it in a way. And those misty, steamy, cloudy techniques we talked about with water are not airbending, no matter how much they look like it, because the bender is moving the water inside the vapor, not the air. The categories in this world are cleaner than they first appear, and most of the confusion comes from powers that resemble each other across the lines. I will close this bit of housekeeping with the one about the man with no name because it is a small, deliberate piece of the show's craft. The silent bounty hunter who fires explosive blasts from the eye on his forehead, the one the group calls Combustion Man, is never given a real name anywhere in the series. That nickname is just what the characters call him for lack of anything else. The show chose to leave him a blank, a walking weapon with no history offered and no name spoken. And I think that is intentional, a way of making him feel less like a person and more like a force, an artillery piece that happens to breathe. Not every gap in this world is an oversight. Some of them are the storytellers deciding that a mystery serves the moment better than an answer would. And the honest thing, the thing this whole night has tried to do, is to tell you clearly which is which, what the show confirms, what it merely implies, and what fans have dreamed up and wished into being. Because the world of Avatar is rich enough that you never have to invent anything to be amazed by it. The true version, every time, turns out to be the better one. So that is every bending style in Avatar, as best as it can be told, from a borrowed flame in a frightened man's palm all the way to a woman of light rebuilding a spirit from a single spark, and every branch that grows between them. The water that heals and the water that seizes, the earth that stands still and the earth that flows like sand, the fire that burns cities and the fire that only keeps an old man warm, the air that carries a child to safety, and the air that pulls the breath from a queen, and beneath all of it, the oldest art of all, the bending of the spirit itself. 4 elements learned from a moon and 3 animals carried down through 10,000 years of lives, and 1 soul that keeps coming back to hold them all in balance. And if you let it, this whole subject settles into something quite peaceful at this hour, because underneath the battles and the lightning and the comets, Avatar has always been a gentle show about growing up and learning to be good. Dressed in the costume of a martial arts fantasy, it came out as a cartoon that a lot of people almost did not take seriously, and it has outlasted nearly everything that surrounded it. Watched now by people who were not even born when it first aired, passed from older siblings to younger ones, from parents to children, precisely because it is kind and thoughtful, and it treats its audience, even its youngest audience, as capable of sitting with real ideas about war and grief and forgiveness and the cost of power. The bending was always the doorway, the beautiful, inventive, endlessly detailed system that pulled you in. What kept you was everything the bending was quietly about. The notion that the strongest person in the room is not the one who hits hardest, but the one who best understands the difference between when to yield and when to stand, when to act and when to let go. I think that is why a video like this can run for hours and still feel calm rather than exhausting. Because none of it is really about violence, even when it looks like it. It is about a world so carefully imagined that a blind girl can see through the ground, and a defeated prince can find a cleaner fire, and a pacifist can end a war without taking a single life. And every one of those turns is earned by rules laid down so patiently that they feel less like magic and more like nature. There are not many stories built with that much care. There are even fewer that wear it as lightly as this one does, so let the details drift now. You do not need to hold any of them. Let the koi turn in their warm pond at the pole. Let the badger moles move through their tunnels in the dark. Let the last two dragons breathe their rainbow fire over two boys who came looking for the truth. Let a guru rise off the ground after 40 years of never touching it. And let the whole long history of a borrowed power carry you the rest of the way down into sleep. The world will still be balanced in the morning. It always finds its way back to balance eventually. That is the one promise this story never stops making. Thank you for spending this long, quiet while here on Ember, and for letting these old stories keep you company in the dark. Rest well. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.